Darkness. Not the comforting black of a deep sleep, but a thick, cloying, absolute nothingness that pressed in from all sides. Leo's last memory was a screech of tires, the shattering of glass, and a brilliant, blinding pain that had swallowed the world whole. Then, this. This absence. For a time, seconds. Hours, there was only the void, and a disorienting sense of self that floated untethered. He was Leo. Leo Chen. 28 years old. Ranked 7th globally in Eternal Conquest, the most punishing real-time strategy game ever coded. He could micromanage 36 unit types across 4 resource streams while planning a decoy assault and a main push simultaneously. His mind was a map, his fingers extensions of a grand tactical will. But now, there was no map. No fingers. No body to command. Panic, cold and sharp, began to needle at the edges of his consciousness. Where am I? What happened? The questions echoed in a space with no sound. He tried to move, to flail, to scream. Nothing responded. Had he died? The car crash, it must have been fatal. But this wasn't an afterlife he'd ever imagined. It was emptiness. Then, sensation began to seep in. Not warmth, but a dull, pervasive cold that seemed to emanate from within. A gritty, granular pressure against something. He became aware of weight. Of being buried. Not in earth, but in something lumpy, brittle, and unyielding. A faint, rotten sweet odor, like spoiled meat and old dust, teased a sense he didn't know he still possessed. Focus, he commanded himself, the gamer's instinct for assessment kicking in through the terror. Assess the situation. Gather intel, he willed himself to look. A pale, fractured light filtered down from somewhere above, illuminating a nightmare tableau. He was in a pit. A vast, shallow excavation in rocky, grey soil. And he was not alone. He was piled amidst hundreds, no, thousands, of others. Bones. Skeletons. Some still clad in tatters of rusted mail or rotting leather, others bare and white. Skulls stared vacantly from hollow sockets, limbs were tangled in a grotesque parody of an embrace. This was a mass grave, a charnel pit on a scale he'd only seen in the darkest fantasy games. And he was one of them. The realization didn't come as a thought, but as a visceral, horrifying understanding. He tried to look down at himself. His perspective shifted, not with the smooth turn of a neck, but with a jerky, rattling motion. He saw not flesh and blood, but aged, yellowed bone. A ribcage, partially crushed. A skeletal arm, fingers ending in sharp points, lying at an unnatural angle. A glimpse of a femur, cracked and dirty. I'm a skeleton, the thought was absurd, impossible. Yet the evidence was irrefutable. The cold was the chill of bare bone. The pressure was the weight of other corpses upon him. The disorientation was the lack of a brain, of eyes, of a nervous system. Yet he was conscious. He was aware in this pile of dead things. A fresh wave of panic, more profound than before, threatened to dissolve what little coherence he had. He was a thinking mind trapped in a broken, inanimate object. A toy discarded in a junkyard of death. This was worse than death. This was purgatory in calcium and decay. No. No, 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 he raged silently, trying to force movement into his limbs. A finger twitched. Not a muscular contraction, but a psychic command that somehow made the bone phalange scrape against a neighboring rib. The sound was a dry, faint click. Hope, desperate and wild, flared. He could move. Barely. He focused all his will, picturing his arm lifting, pushing the debris off his chest. For long moments, nothing happened. Then, with a grating, shuddering series of clicks and pops, his right arm bone began to shift. It was agonizingly slow, like trying to puppeteer a stick with frozen strings. Dirt and fragments of other skeletons rained down into his ribcage as he levered the arm upward. He managed to get it free, the bony hand splayed against the gray sky. The effort left him feeling drained in a way he couldn't define. There was no muscle fatigue, but a kind of mental exhaustion, a dimming of the spark that animated him. He rested, if it could be called that, watching the light through his finger bones. A shadow fell across his hand. Leo's awareness snapped to full alert. The shadow was small, hunched, and moved with a skittering, uneven gait. He strained to look up. Perched on the edge of the bone pile, not 10 feet from him, was a creature. It stood about 3 feet tall, with mottled, greenish-gray skin stretched tight over a wiry frame. Its ears were large and pointed, its nose a squashed, sniffing blob. Beady, black eyes glittered with avarice as they scanned the grave. A scavenger goblin. It wore crude hides and clutched a thick, knotted wooden club in one clawed hand. In the other, it held a ragged sack that already bulged with loot, a few copper coins, a broken dagger, a dented helmet. The goblin's gaze swept over the bones, dismissive at first. Then it stopped. Its head cocked. Those beady eyes locked not on a shiny bauble, but on Leo's outstretched, moving hand. A low, guttural sound of surprise and curiosity issued from its throat. It took a cautious step closer, club held ready. Leo willed his hand to stop moving, to play dead. But it was too late. The goblin had seen. It thinks I'm a trinket, Leo thought, a hysterical edge to his internal voice. Asterisk or maybe fresh meat for its stew pot. Do goblins eat skeletons? Asterisk the absurdity of the question was lost in the surge of primal fear. He was helpless. A pile of bones against an armed, mobile creature. The goblin scrambled down the side of the bone pile, nimble and sure-footed. It stopped a few feet away, sniffing the air loudly. Its eyes narrowed, studying Leo's skull. Leo felt an insane urge to scream at it, to explain he was a person, not a thing. He had no lungs, no voice box. Only the silent scream of his mind. The goblin's expression shifted from curiosity to a cruel, calculating glee. It hefted its club. This wasn't about loot. This was about destruction. A moving skeleton was probably bad luck, or a nuisance, or just something fun to smash. The creature's intent was clear in the way it planted its feet and raised the knotted wood high above its head, aiming directly for Leo's skull. This is it, Leo thought, despair washing over him. Asterisk reborn into a hellscape only to be ended by the fantasy equivalent of a trash panda with a stick. All that strategy, all those hours of command, for this, asterisk he watched the club reach its apex, the goblin's muscles coiling for the downward swing. The world seemed to slow. He could see every splinter on the club, every tooth in the goblin's gleeful snarl. This was his final, ignoble checkpoint. Just as the club began its deadly descent, a flicker of light erupted in the center of Leo's vision. It was a soft, cool, electric blue. It resolved not into a shape in the world, but directly onto his perception, like a holographic display projected onto his consciousness. Rectangular, bordered with intricate, glowing runes that pulsed with a gentle rhythm. At its center, in crisp, blocky text that he could read instinctively, were words. Undying Legion System, initializing. Welcome, Commander. Below that, a simple prompt flashed, urgent and clear. Detected threat, scavenger goblin. Soul essence available for harvest. Absorb soul essence. And beneath that, 2 options, glowing as if waiting for his touch. Y.N. Time had not stopped. The club was still falling, a blur of motion at the edge of the blue interface. The goblin's snarl was reaching its peak. But for Leo, in the space between heartbeats he no longer had, the universe had just expanded infinitely. A system. An interface. The words RTS and cheat code exploded in his mind. This was a game interface. His kind of language. Panic was instantly shoved aside, replaced by the lightning-fast analytical processing of a master strategist. The prompt was a command. A tactical decision to be made in a fraction of a second. Absorb soul essence, from the goblin. The how was irrelevant. The why was survival. The Y and N were his only moves on this new, brutal game board. The club was inches from his brow bone. The rush of air displaced dust from his skull. With every ounce of will left in his skeletal form, Leo made his choice. He focused on the glowing Y, and, with a thought that felt like throwing a mental switch, he selected it. Acknowledged. The system flared brightly. The goblin's club connected. But it did not shatter bone. Instead, it passed through Leo's skull as if through a mist. There was no impact, only a strange, resonant hum that vibrated through every one of Leo's bones. The goblin stumbled forward, off balance, confusion wiping the malice from its face. It looked at its club, then at Leo. From the goblin's chest, a wisp of faint, greenish light began to seep out. It was drawn like iron to a magnet, streaming across the short distance and into Leo's ribcage. The goblin gasped, a wet, choking sound. Its beady eyes widened in terror and pain as its vitality was siphoned away. Its skin grayed, withering. Its muscles deflated. It dropped its club and sack, claws scrabbling at its own chest as if to claw the light back in. Within 3 seconds, the process was complete. The green light vanished into Leo. The goblin collapsed, a desiccated husk that crumpled into dust and rags atop the bone pile, its essence utterly consumed. A new notification appeared on the blue interface, overlaying the fading image of the goblin's demise. Soul essence harvested. Mana cores generated, 5. New commander, you have taken your first step. The Legion awaits your command, ***. Leo lay there, stunned. The immediate threat was gone, reduced to a pile of clothes and ash. The cold in his bones felt less. A faint, new warmth pulsed where the green light had entered, centered in his ribcage. He focused on it. A tiny, spinning core of energy, humming with potential. 5 units of currency. Resource. He turned his attention back to the system interface. It had changed. The welcome message was gone. Now it displayed a clean, minimalist layout. On the left was a status bar. Commander * unnamed skeleton, fragile. Mana cores *5. Essence pool *0/100. Controlled units *0. Structures *0. On the right were menus, currently grayed out except for one, unit blueprints. He focused on it. It expanded. A list appeared, most entries shrouded in darkness with locked tags and higher mana core costs. But at the very top, one entry was illuminated. Skeletal Warrior, Basic. Cost *2 mana cores per unit. Description * a loyal, mindless infantry construct. Armed with a rusted short sword. Weak individually, effective in numbers. The foundation of your legion. Requirements * none. Below the blueprints was another tab, Map. He selected it. A rough, topographical map shimmered into view, mostly black with unexplored labels. But a small area around his current position was lit up, the mass grave, depicted as a skull icon. And about a quarter-mile to the north, marked by a pulsing, gentle blue waypoint, was another icon, a small, pyramidal shape labeled, Safe Haven, Crypt. A line, like a quest guide, connected his position to it. A final notification popped up. Tutorial objective * reach the designated haven to establish your Necropolis core. Enemies may be present. Use your resources wisely. Leo's mind, his strategist's mind, was already whirring. He had 5 mana cores. A skeletal warrior cost 2. He could create 2, leaving 1 core in reserve. The map showed a path to a defensible location. The crypt sounded perfect, covered, hidden, potentially fortified. But the warning enemies may be present was clear. He would need guards. He looked at the remains of the goblin. A few minutes ago, he had been a helpless pile of bones. Now, he had an interface, a resource, a goal, and a means to build power. The despair was gone, burned away by the blue light of the system. This was no longer a nightmare. This was a campaign. A new game, with the highest possible stakes, his continued existence. And Leo Chen, ranked 7th in the world, knew how to play to win. He focused on the skeletal warrior blueprint. The prompt appeared, construct skeletal warrior. Cost, 2 mana cores. Y/N****. He selected Y. Twice. The warmth in his ribcage flared. 2 points of the energy detached, flowing down his skeletal arms and out through his finger bones. The mana core counter on his interface dropped to 1. Around him, the bone pile stirred. From the jumble of anonymous remains, specific bones dislodged themselves, 2 femurs, 2 tibias, 4 arm bones, 2 ribcages, 2 skulls. They floated in the air, bathed in the same soft blue light as the system. They assembled with audible clicks and snaps, forming 2 humanoid skeletons slightly taller than the goblin had been. Rusted, notched short swords appeared in their bony grips, materializing from motes of blue light. They landed on their feet on the bone pile with solid thumps, standing at stiff attention. Their skulls turned toward him. Empty sockets regarded him, but within each, a tiny, steady blue flame ignited, a mirror of the system's glow. A new line appeared on his status, controlled units *2. He could feel them, a faint, constant presence in the back of his awareness. He willed one to take a step forward. It obeyed instantly, without hesitation, its bones moving with a smooth, silent efficiency his own body lacked. A fierce, triumphant joy, cold and sharp, surged through him. Asterisk command. Control, asterisk these were his first units. His opening move. He looked north, toward the direction of the crypt on his mental map. Then he looked at his two warriors, standing ready amidst the field of death. Move out, Leo thought, the order clear in his mind. Secure the path to the haven. The two skeletal warriors turned as one and began to climb out of the mass grave, their bony feet finding purchase on skulls and ribs. Leo, using his arms to drag the rest of his fragile body, began the laborious process of following. The blue interface remained, a comforting constant in the corner of his perception. The prompt from moments ago, the life or death, Y/N, was gone, replaced by the ongoing status of his fledgling empire. He was no longer just a pile of bones. He was a commander. And this war-torn world would soon learn to fear the strategy brewing in the mind of a skeleton. The Goblins' Club never landed. Instead, a brilliant flash of blue light erupted from Leo's skeletal form, washing over the crude weapon and its wielder in a silent wave. The goblin froze mid-swing, its beady eyes widening in confusion, then terror. A ghostly, shimmering essence began to seep from its body, a pale, wispy stream of energy that snaked through the air toward Leo's skull. Leo watched, mesmerized and horrified. The blue interface hovering before his vision, crisp, digital, utterly out of place in this grimy, corpse-strewn pit, displayed a single line of text, absorbing soul essence. 100% complete. The goblin's body crumpled, lifeless, its club clattering against a nearby femur. The essence flowed into Leo, a cold, tingling sensation that spread through his bones, filling him with a strange, humming energy. +5 mana cores acquired, the system announced. Tutorial initiated, establishing base of operations. A mini-map flickered into existence in the corner of Leo's vision, overlaying his view of the mass grave. A pulsing blue waypoint marked a location about 100 yards to the north, a small, rocky hillside partially obscured by gnarled, leafless trees. Text scrolled beside it, hidden crypt, recommended for initial fortification. Low ambient holy energy. Minimal living presence. A crypt, Leo thought, the concept forming in his mind with unnatural clarity. His terror began to recede, replaced by a gamer's instinctual analysis. Safe zone. Defensible position. Resource node. The terms came easily, a comforting echo of countless strategy games played in another life. He tried to move, and with a grating creak, his bones responded. He was a skeleton, a fragile, clicking assemblage of yellowed bones, but he was mobile. He looked down at his hands, phalanges flexing experimentally. No flesh, no muscle, just bare, polished bone gleaming dully in the faint moonlight filtering through the overcast sky. He took a stumbling step, then another, his foot bones sinking into the soft, loamy earth of the grave. The system helpfully provided a status bar, durability, 15 out of 100, fragile. Recommend avoiding combat. Right. No fighting. Not yet. He glanced at the goblin's corpse. It had been so easy. One prompt, and he had stolen its life force. The morality of it should have sickened him, but the cold logic of survival overrode it. This was his new reality. He either adapted or ended up as scattered bones again. Navigating the grave was a macabre ballet. He stepped over ribcages, around shattered skulls, the scent of decay thick in the air, or rather, the memory of scent, a phantom sensation his new form somehow registered. After several minutes of careful progress, he reached the edge of the pit and hauled himself up onto solid ground. The landscape beyond was bleak, rolling, rocky hills under a bruised purple sky, dotted with patches of sickly gray grass. In the distance, the faint glow of fires hinted at settlements or battlefields. The War of Kings, the system had mentioned. He was in a war-torn fantasy world, and he was starting at the absolute bottom. Following the waypoint, he picked his way toward the hillside. The entrance to the crypt was cleverly concealed, a narrow fissure in the rock, half hidden by a tangle of thorny brambles. Leo pushed through, bones scraping against stone, and entered the darkness. The interior was cool and dry, the air stale with the smell of dust and old stone. The system's interface adjusted, casting a soft, blue glow that illuminated his immediate surroundings. He was in a rough-hewn tunnel, about 10 feet wide, sloping gently downward. The walls were lined with crude niches, some holding crumbling skeletons, others empty. This was a forgotten burial place, long abandoned. Location, hidden crypt. Suitability, high. Proceed to main chamber to establish Necropolis core. Leo moved deeper, his footfalls echoing softly. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, circular and about 30 feet across. In the center stood a stone dais, upon which rested a skeletal figure in rusted armor, perhaps a long-dead warrior interred here with honors. Around the edges of the room were more niches, and a few broken pottery shards littered the floor. It was defensible, with only the one entrance tunnel. A good starting point. Main chamber identified. Activate system menu to access blueprints and construction. Focusing his will, a strange, mental effort that felt like clicking a mouse, Leo brought up the main menu. The interface was clean, intuitive, reminiscent of the RTS games he'd mastered. On the left was his resource count, mana cores, 5, in the center was a list of available blueprints, most grayed out. Only one was highlighted, Skeletal Warrior, cost, 2 mana cores per unit. Basic Infantry. Loyal. Requires corpse or bone material for assembly. A thrill, sharp and electric, ran through him. This was it. His first units. His first command. He selected the blueprint. Confirm purchase of Skeletal Warrior blueprint. Y/N. He chose Y, blueprint acquired. Mana cores remaining, 3. Now, to build. The system guided him, select assembly location. Provide bone material. Leo looked around. The skeleton on the dais was intact, but something about using that felt disrespectful. He shook his head, another useless human sentiment. Survival. He needed material. He walked to one of the wall niches containing a skeleton. It was old, bones brittle and discolored. He reached out, and the system interface shimmered over it. Bone material detected. Sufficient for one skeletal warrior. Commence assembly. Y/N. Yes, he whispered, the word a dry rasp of bone on bone. The process was fascinating. The old bones in the niche disassembled themselves, floating into the air in a swirl of pale blue energy. They reconfigured, strengthening, aligning, clicking together with audible snaps. Within seconds, a new skeleton stood before him, taller, sturdier than his own form, with a faint blue glow in its eye sockets. It held a crude, bony short sword that had formed from the excess material. It stood at attention, awaiting orders. Skeletal Warrior created. Durability, 50/100. Combat rating, low. Loyalty, absolute. Leo felt a connection to it, a thin thread of awareness. He could sense its presence, its readiness. He could command it with a thought. Guard the entrance, he projected mentally. The warrior turned smoothly and marched to the tunnel mouth, taking up a position just inside the chamber, sword held ready. One down. He had enough cores for one more, and material from another niche. He repeated the process, watching as the second warrior assembled. This one formed with a small, bony shield on its left arm. Skeletal Warrior created. Mana cores remaining, 1. He now had a small squad. 2 warriors, and himself. A pathetic force by any measure, but it was a start. He ordered the second warrior to patrol the chamber's perimeter. The click-clack of its footsteps echoed in the silence. With his immediate security handled, Leo explored the chamber more thoroughly. The system highlighted a spot on the dais, near the ancient warrior's remains. Necropolis core placement available. Core required for advanced structures and unit production. Cost, 10 mana cores. Too expensive for now. He'd need to harvest more essence. He checked the system logs. The tutorial was complete. Tutorial finished. Primary objective, secure and expand your territory. Secondary objective, harvest soul essence to fuel your legion. He was about to consider his next move, perhaps sending a warrior to scout the tunnels beyond, when a sound froze him. It was a low, grinding noise, like stone scraping against stone, coming from one of the darker side passages he hadn't yet inspected. His warriors instantly reacted, turning toward the sound, weapons raised. The noise grew closer, accompanied by a heavy, dragging footfall. Something large was moving in the tunnels. Leo's mind raced. He had no intelligence. Was it another undead? A creature? An enemy? He positioned his warriors between himself and the source of the noise, backing toward the dais. The system offered no alerts, no identification. Whatever it wasn't part of the tutorial. The scraping grew louder, echoing ominously. Then, from the darkness of the side passage, a pair of glowing red eyes appeared, hovering about 8 feet off the ground. They were large, baleful, and fixed directly on Leo. A deep, guttural growl reverberated through the chamber, shaking dust from the ceiling. The creature stepped fully into the blue glow of the system's light. It was massive, the size of a bear, but shaped like a grotesque spider. Its body was a fused mass of bone, stone, and withered flesh, with 8 thick, jagged legs that scraped against the floor. Its head was a nightmare of overlapping bone plates, with those burning red eyes and mandibles that clicked together with a sound like cracking ice. Dripping venom glistened on its fangs. Crypt Guardian, Undead/Construct Hybrid. Threat level, medium. Detects intruders via vibration and soul resonance. The creature's growl intensified, and it took a step forward, its weight making the floor tremble. Leo's warriors shifted, ready but hopelessly outmatched. This was no goblin. This was a real monster, and it was between him and the only exit. Leo felt a surge of panic, but beneath it, the gamer's mind engaged. Assess. Plan. Execute. He had 2 low-tier units. The creature was large, probably slow to turn. The chamber had pillars, the dais, niches for cover. He could use the environment. He could. The crypt spider lunged, moving faster than he expected, its mandibles snapping toward the nearest warrior. Defend. Kite it. Leo commanded, the terms coming automatically. His warriors moved, the one with the shield stepping forward to intercept while the other circled to the side. The battle for the crypt had begun, and Leo's first real test as a commander was here, in the dark, against a creature of bone and rage. The crypt spider lunged, its 8 legs scrabbling across the stone floor with a sound like shattering pottery. Leo's mind, still adjusting to the reality of being a skeleton in a fantasy world, snapped into focus. The blue system interface hovered at the edge of his vision, but he ignored it for now. Survival came first. Warriors, defensive formation, he commanded through the mental link the system provided. His 2 skeletal warriors, cobbled together from old bones in the crypt, moved with jerky but obedient precision. They raised their rusted short swords, positioning themselves between Leo and the advancing monstrosity. The spider was the size of a large dog, its body a grotesque fusion of chitin and petrified bone, with glowing red eyes that cast an eerie light in the dim crypt. Leo's own hollow eye sockets took in the scene. The crypt was a small, damp chamber with crumbling stone walls, littered with broken coffins and scattered bones. The air smelled of decay and damp earth. In his previous life as a gamer, he'd faced worse in virtual battles, but this was visceral, the cold stone beneath his bony feet, the musty scent, the very real threat of annihilation. It's just like an RTS tutorial mission, he thought, forcing calm into his mental voice. Assess the enemy, use basic tactics. The spider hissed, a sound like grinding stones, and charged. Leo's warriors met it head-on. One swung its sword, but the blade glanced off the spider's hardened carapace with a dull clang. The creature retaliated, a leg striking out and shattering the warrior's ribcage. Leo felt a pang of loss, not emotional, but strategic. That warrior had cost him precious mana cores. Fall back. Flank it. Leo ordered. The remaining warrior dodged to the side, while the damaged one, though crippled, lunged from the other direction. The spider hesitated, its red eyes darting between them. Leo seized the moment. Now, strike its joints. The warriors obeyed, aiming for the thinner connections between the spider's legs and body. One sword found its mark, slicing through a joint with a sickening crack. The spider screeched, stumbling. Leo's mind raced. He needed to contribute, he was just a pile of bones himself, fragile and unarmed. But the system had given him control. He focused on the spider, trying to sense its essence. A prompt flickered in his vision, target weakened. Absorbed soul essence. Y/N. Not yet, he muttered mentally. Finish it first. He directed his warriors to press the attack. The damaged one, missing half its ribs, managed to hook its sword under the spider's body, while the other hacked at its head. After a frantic minute of clashing and scraping, the spider collapsed, its red eyes dimming to black. Leo let out a mental sigh of relief. His warriors stood battered but functional, and he was unharmed. The system chimed softly. Combat concluded. Victory. Soul essence detected. Absorb. Yes, Leo confirmed. A faint blue light emanated from the spider's corpse, streaming into Leo's skeletal form. He felt a surge of energy, cold and alien, yet empowering. The system displayed, soul essence absorbed, plus 10 mana cores. Total, 15 mana cores. Leo examined his warriors. The damaged one was barely holding together, its movement sluggish. Can I repair them? He wondered. The system responded with a new notification: blueprint unlocked, skeletal warrior repair, cost, 2 mana cores per warrior, dot. Use it, Leo commanded. Blue energy enveloped the warriors, and within seconds, their bones knit back together, good as new. It cost 4 mana cores, leaving him with 11. Worth it, he thought. I need every unit. He took stock of the crypt. The battle had left scratches on the stone floor and scattered bits of spider chitin. His mind, honed by years of strategy games, began planning. This crypt was his starting base, a hidden, defensible location. But it was also a potential death trap if larger threats found it. The noise from the spider fight might have attracted attention. System, show me available blueprints, he requested. The interface updated, displaying a list. He had already purchased the skeletal warrior blueprint. Now, a new option glowed: Shade Blueprint, Ethereal Scout Unit. Cost, 10 mana cores. Unlocked by first combat victory. Leo hesitated. Scouting was crucial in any strategy game, intelligence could mean the difference between survival and defeat. But spending 10 mana cores would leave him with only one, barely enough for anything else. But if I don't know what's out there, I could walk into a trap, he reasoned. And the system mentioned this is a war-torn world. I need eyes. He purchased the blueprint. Shade Blueprint acquired. Mana cores remaining, 1. Creating a shade required ambient soul energy, which the crypt had in small amounts from old deaths. Leo focused, and a wisp of blue mist coalesced in the air, forming into a faint, humanoid shape with glowing eyes. It hovered silently, awaiting orders. Through the mental link, Leo sensed its capabilities: incorporeal, able to pass through walls, invisible to most living beings, and capable of limited perception at a distance. Scout the surface, Leo commanded. Report back anything of note: enemies, resources, terrain. The shade nodded, a slight dip of its misty head, and drifted upward, passing through the crypt's ceiling as if it were air. Leo waited, his skeletal form tense. He used the time to explore the crypt more thoroughly. It was larger than he'd first thought, with side tunnels leading deeper underground. One tunnel was blocked by a cave-in, another by a rusted iron gate. Potential for expansion later, he noted mentally. But first, I need to secure this area. Minutes passed. Leo's warriors stood guard, motionless. He practiced moving his own bones, getting used to the sensation. It was strange: no muscles, no nerves, just willpower and the system's energy holding him together. He could feel the mana cores thrumming within him, a cold reservoir of power. Suddenly, the shade returned, phasing through the wall. It projected an image directly into Leo's mind, a view from above ground. The crypt entrance was hidden in a rocky hillside, overgrown with moss and vines. Beyond, a forest stretched out, but nearby, a dirt path wound through the trees. And on that path, a group of humans approached. Leo's focus sharpened. The image showed 5 figures, 4 soldiers in chainmail with swords and shields, and 1 in gleaming plate armor, a knight, with a surcoat bearing a golden lion emblem. They moved cautiously, scanning the area. The knight pointed toward the crypt entrance, his gesture unmistakable. He drew his sword, the steel glinting in the dappled forest light. The shade's perception conveyed more: the soldiers were talking, but Leo couldn't hear words, only their tense postures. The knight seemed to be giving orders. One soldier nodded and gestured toward the crypt. A patrol, Leo realized. From one of the human kingdoms in this war of kings. And they've spotted my hideout. His mind raced. He had only 2 warriors and a shade, plus himself, a fragile skeleton. The humans were armed, armored, and likely experienced. A direct fight would be suicide. But the crypt offered advantages: narrow tunnels, darkness, and the element of surprise if he played it right. The system chimed again. New objective: defend the Necropolis. Threat detected: human patrol. Recommended action: utilize terrain for ambush. Reward for survival: blueprint unlock or mana core bonus. Leo felt a grim determination settle over him. This wasn't a game anymore, it was life or death. But his gamer instincts kicked in. Okay, think. They're coming in. I have the home ground advantage. The Shade can monitor their movements. My warriors are weak but expendable. I need to hit them where they're vulnerable. He commanded the Shade to continue scouting, focusing on the patrol's approach. Then he turned to his warriors. Positions, he ordered mentally. He placed one warrior behind a large broken coffin near the crypt entrance, hidden in shadow. The other he stationed further back in the main chamber, as a reserve. Leo himself retreated to a side tunnel, where he could observe without being seen. Through the Shade's eyes, he watched as the knight led the soldiers toward the crypt entrance. They paused outside, the knight peering into the darkness. He said something to his men, Leo wished he could hear, but the Shade only conveyed visuals. 2 soldiers entered first, swords raised, their footsteps echoing in the stone passage. Leo held his mental breath. The first soldier stepped into the main chamber, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. He spotted the scattered bones and spider remains. Clear so far, he called back, his voice muffled but audible to Leo now. The second soldier followed. Then the knight entered, his armor clanking. The remaining 2 soldiers stayed at the entrance, guarding the way out. 3 inside, 2 outside, Leo calculated. If I can take out the ones inside quickly, the others might flee or be easier to pick off. He signaled his hidden warrior. As the first soldier moved past the broken coffin, the skeletal warrior leaped out, swinging its rusted sword. The soldier yelped, parrying just in time, but the surprise attack made him stumble. The knight reacted instantly, his sword flashing. Undead. In the crypt, he shouted. Leo's warrior fought bravely, but it was outmatched. The knight's blade sheared through its bones, reducing it to a pile of fragments. Leo felt the loss of another mana core investment, but it had served its purpose, distraction. Now the humans were focused on the main chamber. Leo ordered his second warrior to attack from the other side. It charged, drawing the soldiers' attention. In the confusion, Leo used the Shade to phase through the ceiling and emerge behind the 2 guards at the entrance. The Shade couldn't attack physically, but it could create illusions, a faint whispering sound, a chill in the air. The guards shifted nervously, glancing around. Did you hear that? One muttered. Inside, the knight and soldiers dispatched the second warrior with efficient strikes. But as they turned, panting, they realized the crypt was silent except for their own breathing. Where's the master? The knight growled. There must be a necromancer here. Leo watched from the shadows. He had no spells yet, no powerful units. But he had cunning. He directed the Shade to intensify its efforts, making the whispers louder, stirring up dust in the corners. The guards at the entrance backed away, one crossing himself. It's haunted, sir, he called in. The knight strode toward the entrance, his face set in a grim line. Stand firm. It's just undead trickery. But as he reached the entrance, Leo made his move. He focused his will, using his single remaining mana core to enhance the Shade's illusion. A faint, ghostly figure appeared in the tunnel, a shimmering image of a larger skeleton, armed and threatening. The soldiers gasped. The knight raised his sword. Face me, creature. But Leo wasn't done. He had the Shade dart past them, toward the forest, and create a noise, a rustling in the bushes. The guards outside spun, pointing. Something's out there. In that moment of distraction, Leo acted. He sent a mental command to the Shade to return and monitor, then he retreated deeper into the crypt, into a narrow side tunnel he'd noted earlier. The knight, after a tense moment, ordered his men to regroup. We'll seal this crypt and report back. There's something here, but we're not equipped for a full cleanse. Leo listened from his hiding place as the humans withdrew, their footsteps fading. The Shade confirmed they were leaving, heading back down the path. Leo emerged, assessing the damage. His warriors were destroyed, but he'd survived his first encounter with humans. And he'd learned valuable lessons, his forces were weak, scouting was essential, and this world was dangerous. The system chimed. Objective completed, survive patrol encounter. Reward, +5 mana cores. Total, 6 mana cores. New blueprint available, soul trap, defensive structure, ... Leo nodded mentally. He had a reprieve, but he knew it was temporary. That night would return with reinforcements. And now, he had a glimpse of the surface world, a world at war, where he was an unwelcome intruder. As he began planning his next moves, the Shade's last image lingered in his mind, the knight, sword drawn, pointing toward the crypt with unwavering determination. The game was on, and the stakes were higher than any he'd ever played. The damp stone walls of the crypt seemed to close in around Leo as he watched the flickering interface of the Undying Legion System. After the brief skirmish with the human patrol, his skeletal warriors stood motionless in the main chamber, their bony frames still bearing fresh scratches from the encounter. The air smelled of old earth, mold, and the faint metallic tang of spilled blood, a scent that had become strangely familiar in his new existence. Leo focused his consciousness, which felt like a cold flame burning within his skull. The system displayed his current resources, 15 mana cores, earned from absorbing the essence of the crypt spider and the 2 human soldiers his warriors had managed to take down in the tunnels. He recalled the ambush with grim satisfaction, positioning his warriors in narrow passageways where the human's armor became a hindrance, using the Shade's ethereal form to create distracting illusions of movement in the shadows. It had been messy, chaotic, but effective. The 2 soldiers had fallen quickly, their life force flowing into him as he mentally confirmed the system's prompt to absorb their essence. Still not enough, Leo thought, his mental voice echoing in the silence of his own mind. The system's tutorial had hinted that upgrading the Necropolis core required 20 mana cores. He needed just 5 more to reach that threshold, to unlock whatever new capabilities lay beyond. The crypt around him felt increasingly like a prison, a temporary shelter that could easily become a tomb if he didn't grow stronger. He commanded his Shade to resume scouting. The spectral unit, a wisp of shadow and faint blue light, drifted through the stone walls toward the surface. Through its senses, Leo could see the fading daylight outside. The crypt entrance was partially concealed by fallen rubble and overgrown vines, but the signs of recent disturbance were clear. Boot prints in the mud, broken branches where the patrol had retreated. And something else, a faint golden glow that seemed to linger in the air, pulsing with an energy that made the Shade's form waver uncomfortably. Holy energy, Leo realized with a jolt of alarm. The system hadn't mentioned anything about that during the ambush. But now, as he focused on the residual aura, a new alert flashed across his interface. Alert, Holy Aura detected. Source, Paladin class entity. Threat level, high. Recommendation, fortify position or retreat, ***. Paladin. The word carried weight even in Leo's gamer mind, holy warriors, blessed with divine magic, specifically designed to destroy undead. The knight he'd seen leading the patrol wasn't just some random soldier, he was a hunter, and Leo was his prey. We need to prepare, Leo whispered to himself, the sound emerging as a dry rasp of bone on bone. He had no vocal cords, but the system seemed to translate his intent into audible speech when he wished it. His 2 skeletal warriors turned their empty eye sockets toward him, awaiting commands. First, he needed those last 5 mana cores. The system showed that absorbing essence from weaker creatures like rats or insects yielded negligible returns, maybe 0.1 cores each, if he was lucky. He needed something substantial. The crypt had deeper levels, unexplored tunnels that his Shade had detected but not fully scouted. There might be other creatures down there, perhaps more spiders or something else that had made this place its home. He sent 1 warrior to guard the main chamber's entrance, positioning it behind a crumbling stone pillar where it could ambush anything coming in. The other he kept with him as he moved toward a side passage he'd noticed earlier, a narrow crack in the wall that led downward. The Shade returned from the surface, its form shimmering with unease as it reported the Paladin's lingering aura growing stronger, not fading. He's coming back, Leo thought. And he's not alone this time. The side passage opened into a lower chamber, smaller than the main crypt but filled with ancient burial niches carved into the walls. Here, the air was colder, and a different scent predominated, not just decay, but something sharp and acrid. Leo's warrior moved ahead, its bony feet clicking softly on the stone floor. In the faint blue light that emanated from Leo's own eye sockets, a side effect of the system's interface, he discovered, he could see movement in the shadows. 3 creatures emerged from the niches, humanoid, but twisted and hunched, with grayish skin stretched tight over visible bones. Ghouls. Their eyes glowed with a sickly green light, and they moved with a jerky, hungry gait. The system identified them immediately. Entity, Crypt Ghoul, Undead. Essence Yield, 2 mana cores each. Threat, Moderate. Note, Feral, driven by hunger for flesh, ***. Perfect. 6 cores total if he could take all 3. But ghouls were faster and more aggressive than his skeletal warriors, and they had claws that could shred bone. Leo assessed the chamber, about 20 feet across, with the ghouls spreading out to flank him. His warriors stood ready, but outnumbered. Time for some strategy, Leo thought, a familiar thrill running through him. This was what he lived for in his past life, the puzzle of combat, the satisfaction of outthinking his opponents. He commanded the warrior to hold position near the entrance, creating a choke point. Then he directed the shade to create an illusion, a duplicate of himself, standing a few feet to the left, glowing with the same blue light. The ghouls hesitated, confused by the sudden appearance of two targets. They snarled, drool dripping from their jagged teeth. Leo focused on the nearest one, sending a mental command to his warrior, strike now. The skeletal warrior lunged, its rusted sword swinging in a wide arc. It caught the first ghoul across the chest, tearing through rotted flesh and drawing a gurgling shriek. The other two ghouls focused on the illusion, swiping at empty air as the shade maintained the deception. Leo moved forward, his own bony hands reaching out. He had no weapons, but the system had taught him that direct contact allowed for essence absorption if the target was weakened enough. He grabbed the wounded ghoul, his fingers sinking into its clammy flesh. A prompt appeared. Absorb soul essence. Y/N****. Y, Leo confirmed. The ghoul's body convulsed, then dissolved into a stream of silvery energy that flowed into Leo's skeletal frame. He felt a surge of power, cold, invigorating. The system chimed, +2 mana cores. The remaining ghouls, realizing the illusion was fake, turned on Leo with renewed fury. But now it was 2 against 2, and Leo had the advantage of tactical awareness. He ordered his warrior to engage the left ghoul while he focused on the right. The ghoul leaped at him, claws extended. Leo dodged awkwardly, his body was still clumsy, unaccustomed to rapid movement, but he managed to avoid the worst of the attack. A claw scraped across his ribcage, leaving deep grooves in the bone. Pain flared, a strange, distant sensation that registered more as system damage than true agony. His health bar in the interface dipped slightly. Not good, he thought. He couldn't afford to take much more damage in his current fragile state. Warrior, flank it, he rasped, the command echoing in the chamber. His skeletal warrior disengaged from its own opponent and moved to strike the ghoul from behind. The distraction worked, the ghoul turned, and Leo seized the opportunity. He lunged, his bony hands closing around the creature's neck. Another prompt, another confirmation, and the second ghoul dissolved into essence. +2 mana cores. The last ghoul, now alone, let out a panicked screech and tried to flee back into the niches. But Leo's warrior was faster, cutting off its retreat. A quick sword thrust to the back, and the ghoul fell. Leo absorbed its essence as well. +2 mana cores. He stood in a suddenly silent chamber, his resources now at 21 mana cores, enough to upgrade the Necropolis core. But before he could celebrate, a tremor ran through the crypt. Dust sifted from the ceiling, and from above, he heard the sound of heavy footsteps, armor clanking, and a voice shouting commands. The paladin was here, and he'd brought reinforcements. Leo hurried back to the main chamber, his warrior following. The shade reported from the entrance tunnel, at least 6 soldiers, all armed and armored, with the paladin at their head. The paladin's aura was now a visible golden glow that pushed back the crypt's darkness, making the shade recoil. No time to upgrade now, Leo thought, panic rising. He needed to set another ambush, but the paladin's holy energy would make it difficult, his shade's illusions might not work against someone with divine senses, and his warriors were vulnerable to blessed weapons. He positioned his 2 warriors in the main chamber, one on either side of the entrance. He himself retreated to the far wall, near the ancient stone altar that dominated the room. The system flashed another alert. Warning, holy aura intensifying. Paladin approaching main chamber. Defensive measures recommended, ****. What defensive measures, Leo thought bitterly. He had no traps, no spells, just a handful of undead minions. But then he remembered the side passage where he'd fought the ghouls, it looped around to another tunnel that emerged behind the main chamber. If he could lure the paladin in, maybe he could flank him. He sent the shade to create an illusion at the chamber's entrance, a faint, ghostly image of a skeletal mage, wishful thinking, but it might buy a moment's distraction. Then he ordered one warrior to hide in the shadows near the side passage, ready to attack from behind. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the paladin's voice, clear and commanding, "By the light of the sun god, cleanse this profane place. Undead, show yourselves." The soldiers entered first, shields raised, swords at the ready. They fanned out, their torchlight mixing with the paladin's golden aura to illuminate the chamber in an eerie blend of fire and holiness. Leo's illusion shimmered at the far end, the soldiers hesitated, unsure. Then the paladin stepped in, and Leo got his first good look at him. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in silver plate armor adorned with sun motifs. His face was stern, clean-shaven, with eyes that burned with conviction. In his hands, he held a long sword that glowed with a soft, white light, divine energy made manifest. There, the paladin shouted, pointing his sword at Leo's actual position near the altar. The illusion hadn't fooled him at all. A nascent lich, hiding in the shadows. Men, secure the perimeter. I'll handle this abomination myself. The soldiers moved to block the exits, but Leo had anticipated this. He sent a mental command to his hidden warrior, now. The skeletal warrior burst from the side passage, attacking the nearest soldier from behind. Chaos erupted, shouts, the clash of steel on bone. The paladin didn't even glance back, his eyes remained fixed on Leo. He took a step forward, his sword's glow brightening. Your tricks won't save you, creature, the paladin said, his voice calm but filled with contempt. I am Sir Alaric, Paladin of the Dawn. I have purged dozens of your kind from these lands. You will be no different. Leo tried to respond, but his rasping voice failed him. Instead, he focused on the system. With 21 mana cores, he could upgrade the Necropolis core now, but it would take time, precious seconds he didn't have. Or he could spend the cores on something else, maybe unlock a new unit blueprint. The system showed available options: Skeletal Archer, 5 cores, Bone Hound, 8 cores, or upgrade existing warriors, 3 cores each. None of them seemed like they'd make a difference against a paladin. Sir Alaric advanced, his holy aura pressing against Leo like a physical weight. It felt like fire on his bones, a deep, searing discomfort that made his movements sluggish. The paladin raised his sword, the light gathering at its tip until it was almost too bright to look at. In the name of the sun god, I banish you back to the darkness. He lunged, his sword sweeping down in a blazing arc aimed directly at Leo's skull. Time seemed to slow. Leo could see every detail, the intricate engravings on the blade, the paladin's determined expression, the way the holy light cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. This is it, Leo thought, a strange calm settling over him. I survived a car crash, reincarnated as a skeleton, built a small army, and now I'm going to die to a paladin in a crypt. What a way to go, But then, instinct took over. He threw himself to the side, the sword missing his head by inches and striking the stone altar instead. Chips of rock flew, and the impact echoed through the chamber. Leo scrambled backward, his bony fingers scraping against the floor. He could feel the system screaming at him to do something, anything. He had one chance. As Sir Alaric recovered his stance, Leo focused all his will on the system. He didn't have time for an upgrade, but he could spend cores instantly. He selected the option to upgrade his 2 skeletal warriors, 6 cores total. A flash of blue light, and his warriors suddenly looked different, their bones thickened, their movements became smoother, and they gained a faint, menacing glow. Warriors, attack! Leo commanded, his voice a desperate shout. The enhanced warriors moved with new speed, closing in on Sir Alaric from both sides. The paladin parried one attack, then spun to block the other, his holy sword clashing against bone with showers of sparks. But he was outnumbered and momentarily distracted. Leo saw his opening. He didn't have a weapon, but he had the system. He focused on the paladin, and for the first time, he tried to use the essence absorption ability on a living, powerful target. The system responded with a new prompt. Target, Sir Alaric, Paladin. Essence yield, 10 plus mana cores, estimated. Warning, direct absorption requires physical contact and target incapacitation. High risk, ***. Too risky. But maybe he didn't need to absorb him, just weaken him. Leo ordered his shade to interfere, creating multiple illusions of warriors rushing from all directions. Sir Alaric's eyes widened slightly as he tried to track the false threats, his holy aura flickering with the effort. In that moment of confusion, Leo's enhanced warrior landed a solid blow on the paladin's side, its sword biting through a gap in the armor. Sir Alaric grunted in pain, golden blood welling from the wound. His aura dimmed. Enough, the paladin roared, and he slammed his sword into the ground. A wave of holy energy exploded outward, throwing Leo's warriors back and dispelling the shade's illusions. The force hit Leo like a hammer, cracking several of his ribs and sending him skidding across the floor. He lay there, dazed, his health bar in the interface flashing red. He was badly damaged, and Sir Alaric was still standing, wounded but far from defeated. The paladin pulled his sword from the stone, his expression now one of grim fury. "You are more cunning than most undead," Sir Alaric said, advancing slowly. "But cunning won't save you from divine judgment." He raised his sword again, the glow returning, brighter than ever. Leo tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond, the holy energy had paralyzed him. He could only watch as the paladin closed the distance, the tip of the sword aimed straight at his skull. So this is how it ends, Leo thought, a strange sense of resignation washing over him. But then, deep within the system, something stirred. A hidden subroutine activated, triggered by the extreme threat and his low health. A new message flashed, urgent and bold. Emergency protocol, Necropolis core upgrade initiated automatically. Consuming 20 mana cores. Upgrade in progress, 3. 2, ***. Sir Alaric's sword descended, the holy light blazing like a miniature sun. Leo could feel the heat, the purity of it burning away at his very essence. He braced for the end. 1. Upgrade complete, ***. A surge of power erupted from deep within the crypt, from the very stones beneath them. The ground shook, and from the walls, tendrils of dark energy snaked out, wrapping around Sir Alaric's legs. The paladin stumbled, his strike going wide, the sword embedding itself in the floor next to Leo's head. Sir Alaric looked down in shock, then up at Leo, his eyes wide with realization. "What have you done?" he whispered. But Leo didn't have time to answer. The system was flooding him with notifications, new options, new powers. And from the entrance, he heard the sounds of his soldiers being overwhelmed, the remaining human forces were pushing in, drawn by the commotion. Sir Alaric wrenched his sword free, his holy aura flaring as he fought against the dark tendrils. He turned his gaze back to Leo, and this time, there was no contempt, only cold, deadly focus. "No matter what tricks you use, creature," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I will see you destroyed." He burst forward, breaking free of the energy bindings, his sword glowing with a light so intense it hurt to look at. He crossed the chamber in 3 swift strides, and before Leo could react, before the system could offer another solution, the paladin was upon him. The sword came down, not in a sweeping arc this time, but in a precise, thrusting motion aimed directly at Leo's chest, where his core, his essence, resided. Leo tried to roll away, but he was too slow, too damaged. The blade pierced through his ribcage, and white-hot agony exploded through his being. He couldn't scream, couldn't even think. The world dissolved into pain and blinding light. And then, darkness. Pain was a concept Leo had almost forgotten. In his previous life as a gamer, pain had been abstract, a sore wrist from too many hours at the keyboard, perhaps. But now, as a skeleton with a holy sword embedded in his chest, pain was an all-consuming reality. Sir Alaric's blade burned with divine energy, searing through bone and the faint traces of soul essence that held Leo together. Darkness threatened to swallow his consciousness, but the system's interface flickered stubbornly before his eyes, a blue haze in the gloom of the crypt. Critical damage detected. Soul essence draining. Initiating emergency protocols, The word scrolled across his vision, and Leo felt a surge of energy from the Necropolis core beneath him. The upgrade he had triggered earlier was now complete, and a wave of cold, dark mana washed over him. The holy sword's light dimmed slightly, and Leo mustered every ounce of willpower. With a grating screech, he pulled himself off the blade, collapsing into a heap of bones on the damp stone floor. The paladin stood over him, his armor gleaming in the faint light filtering from the crypt entrance. "Abomination," Sir Alaric growled, raising his sword for a final strike. "Your corruption ends here." But Leo was already moving. Or rather, his warriors were. The 2 skeletal warriors he had enhanced earlier lunged from the shadows, their bone swords clashing against the paladin's armor. They were no match for his holy might, one was shattered with a single backhand blow, its essence dissipating into the air. The other managed to scratch his pauldron before being cleaved in 2. But it bought Leo precious seconds. Crawling backward, Leo focused on the system. His mana cores were dangerously low, but the essence from the fallen warriors and the earlier ghouls still lingered. "Absorb," he commanded silently. Wisps of pale light flowed from the broken bones around him, feeding into his own fractured form. The pain receded slightly, and his chest began to knit together with dark energy. He could feel the Necropolis core pulsing beneath the crypt, a steady heartbeat of power that was now his to command. Fleeing will not save you, Sir Alaric boomed, striding forward. His boots echoed in the narrow tunnel. This place will be purified by dawn. Leo didn't respond. He was too busy navigating the system's menus. The Wraith blueprint had been unlocked earlier, but he hadn't had the resources to create one. Now, with the absorbed essence, he had just enough. Purchase Wraith blueprint. Confirm. A new set of schematics unfolded in his mind, ethereal, ghostly forms that could phase through walls and drain life force. It cost nearly all his remaining mana cores, but he had no choice. Construct Wraith. Location, immediate vicinity, *. The air grew cold, and a faint moaning sound filled the chamber. From the shadows near the ceiling, a translucent figure coalesced, a humanoid shape with hollow eyes and wispy tendrils for hands. It was his first advanced unit, and Leo felt a surge of grim satisfaction. Attack the paladin. Harass, do not engage directly, *. The Wraith obeyed without hesitation. It swooped down, passing through the stone walls as if they were mist, and materialized behind Sir Alaric. Its touch was like ice, and the paladin staggered as a wave of fatigue washed over him. He swung his sword, but the blade passed harmlessly through the Wraith's insubstantial form. Dark magic, he spat, his holy aura flaring to repel the creature. Leo used the distraction to retreat further into the crypt. The tunnels here were older, carved with strange runes that glowed faintly with residual necrotic energy. He could feel the Necropolis core's influence strengthening as he went deeper. His skeletal body, though still damaged, moved more smoothly now, the dark mana reinforcing his bones. He sent a mental command to his remaining shade, which had been hovering near the entrance. Scout the surface. Find a safe route, and report any threats, *. The ethereal scout slipped away, and Leo focused on the immediate danger. Sir Alaric was battling the Wraith, his holy light driving it back but not destroying it. The creature was elusive, darting in to sap his strength before retreating. Leo could see the paladin's movements slowing, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. But he was still a formidable opponent. With a roar, he channeled divine energy into his sword and unleashed a wave of light that forced the Wraith to dissipate temporarily. This is not over, undead filth, Sir Alaric shouted, his voice echoing through the tunnels. He was backing toward the entrance now, his armor dented and scorched from the Wraith's attacks. I will return with the full might of the Silver Crusade. We will scour this crypt from the world. With that, he turned and fled, his footsteps fading into the distance. Leo let out a mental sigh of relief, though his body was too broken for such gestures. He collapsed against a wall, the cold stone a welcome support. The Wraith reformed beside him, its form flickering weakly. It had drained much of its energy in the fight, but it had done its job. Good, Leo thought. Now, time to assess the damage. He opened the system interface. His status was dire. Soul Essence, 15%, recovering slowly. Mana cores, 2, barely enough for minor actions. Units, 1 Wraith, damaged, 1 Shade, scouting, 0 skeletal warriors. Necropolis core, level 2, stable, providing basic regeneration. The crypt around him was a mess. Broken bones littered the floor, and the air still smelled of ozone and decay. But he was alive, or as alive as a skeleton could be. He focused on absorbing the residual essence from the fallen warriors and the ghouls from earlier. It was a slow process, but every bit helped. As he did, his mind raced with strategy. Sir Alaric would be back, and with reinforcements. He needed more power, and quickly. Just then, his shade returned. It floated into the chamber, its form shimmering with urgency. Through its eyes, Leo saw a vision of the surface. The crypt entrance was hidden in a rocky outcrop, overlooking a wide valley. And in that valley, a scene of carnage unfolded. Hundreds of corpses lay strewn across the ground, humans in the colors of 2 different kingdoms. Banners bearing a lion and a stag were trampled into the mud. It was a battlefield, fresh and ripe for harvesting. Leo's mind, honed by years of strategy gaming, immediately saw the opportunity. This was exactly what he needed. A large-scale source of soul essence, enough to fuel his growth and prepare for the paladin's return. But getting there would be risky. The surface was exposed, and Sir Alaric might have left scouts. He needed to move fast and stealthily. Shade, continue scouting. Map the safest route to the battlefield, and monitor for any living presence, *. The shade nodded, or gave the impression of nodding, and vanished again. Leo turned his attention to his wraith. Asterisk recover. Guard this chamber. Alert me to any intruders. Asterisk the creature settled into a corner, its form solidifying slightly as it absorbed ambient necrotic energy from the crypt. With a groan of grinding bone, Leo pushed himself upright. His chest still ached where the holy sword had pierced him, but the dark mana was slowly repairing the damage. He began to explore the deeper parts of the crypt, searching for anything useful. The runes on the walls seemed to tell a story, an ancient tale of a necromancer who had once ruled here, but Leo couldn't decipher them. He found a small alcove filled with dusty scrolls and a few rusted weapons, but nothing of immediate value. As he searched, his mind worked on a plan. He would need to harvest the essence from the battlefield under cover of darkness. His wraith could help, but it was too weak for sustained combat. He needed more units. With the mana cores he had left, he could maybe create one more skeletal warrior, but that wouldn't be enough. No, he needed to focus on essence gathering first. Once he had enough, he could unlock more blueprints, perhaps even something stronger. Hours passed in the crypt's eternal twilight. Leo sat cross-legged on the floor, meditating on the system. He reviewed the tutorials, learning more about his abilities. The Necropolis core allowed him to sense the crypt's layout, and he could now feel the faint pulses of life from the surface, small animals, perhaps, or distant humans. He also discovered a new feature, soul traps, basic defensive structures that could slow enemies and drain their energy. But they required mana cores he didn't have. Finally, his shade returned. It projected a mental map into his mind, a winding path through rocky terrain that avoided the main roads. The battlefield was about a mile away, and there were no signs of living humans nearby. However, the shade had detected a few scavengers, crows and wild dogs, feeding on the corpses. They wouldn't be a threat, but they might attract attention. It's now or never, Leo thought. He gathered his remaining strength and stood. His wraith floated to his side, its form still flickering but functional. Asterisk we move at nightfall. Stay hidden, and follow my commands, asterisk. As dusk settled over the valley, Leo emerged from the crypt. The air was cool and carried the scent of blood and iron. He moved cautiously, his skeletal form blending with the shadows. The wraith drifted ahead, scouting for danger. The journey was tense, every rustle of leaves or distant howl set Leo on edge. But his strategic mind kept him focused. He avoided open areas, sticking to cover, and used the wraith to phase through obstacles and check ahead. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the edge of the battlefield. The scene was even more gruesome up close. Hundreds of dead soldiers lay in heaps, their armor shattered and weapons broken. The ground was churned to mud, stained red. Leo felt a strange mix of revulsion and hunger. In his past life, he would have been horrified, but now, as an undead being, he saw only opportunity. Begin harvesting, he commanded silently. He and the wraith moved among the corpses. Leo placed his bony hands on a fallen knight, and the system activated. Absorbed soul essence, pale light flowed from the body into him, and he felt a surge of power. Mana cores ticked upward in his interface. He moved to the next, and the next, a grim reaper in the night. The wraith helped, draining essence from multiple corpses at once and transferring it to Leo. It was slow, methodical work. Leo's essence reserves climbed steadily, 20%, 30%, 50%. His mana cores increased, 5, 10, 20. The system chimed with notifications as he unlocked new thresholds. But he didn't stop to check. He was driven by urgency, Sir Alaric would be back soon, and he needed to be ready. As he harvested, he couldn't help but reflect on his situation. Just weeks ago, he had been a gamer in a comfortable room, now he was a skeleton in a war-torn world, fighting for survival. The irony wasn't lost on him. But he pushed the thoughts aside. This was his reality now, and he would master it with the same precision he had used in his games. Suddenly, the wraith hissed a warning. Leo froze. In the distance, he saw a torchlight, a patrol of human soldiers, perhaps from one of the kingdoms, returning to check the battlefield. They were far off, but moving in his direction. We need to leave, he thought. He had harvested enough essence from about a third of the corpses. It would have to do. Asterisk retreat to the crypt. Now, asterisk. He and the wraith slipped away, fading into the darkness. As they moved, Leo checked his status. He now had over 50 mana cores and his soul essence was at 70%. It was a massive influx, enough to unlock significant upgrades. But there was no time to celebrate. Back in the crypt, he would need to act fast. As they neared the crypt entrance, his shade, which had been monitoring the area, sent a final image. It showed the battlefield from above, where hundreds of corpses still lay untouched. But more importantly, it showed something else. In the far distance, the banners of the Silver Crusade were visible, marching toward the crypt. Sir Alaric was making good on his promise. Leo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. He had the resources now, but time was running out. He ducked into the crypt, the wraith following, and sealed the entrance with a mental command to the Necropolis core. In the safety of the darkness, he opened the system interface, ready to spend his hard-earned mana cores. But first, he needed to see what his shade had spotted. He focused on the scout's last report. The image clarified, the battlefield was vast, with corpses numbering in the hundreds, a treasure trove of essence. But beyond it, the shade's view zoomed in on a nearby hill, where a large camp was being set up, not just Sir Alaric's crusade, but what looked like a full army, with siege engines and dozens of knights. They were preparing for a major assault. And then, the cliffhanger, as the shade panned over the battlefield, its ethereal eyes caught a glimpse of something moving among the corpses. Not scavengers, but figures in dark cloaks, harvesting essence just as Leo had been. They moved with unnatural grace, and one of them looked up, its eyes glowing with a familiar necrotic light. Rival Undead. Leo had no time to ponder, because the shade's view shifted to the center of the battlefield, where hundreds of corpses from the recent clash between the Lion and Stag kingdoms lay in a massive heap, untouched and ripe for the taking. But surrounding them were signs of recent activity, footprints, disturbed earth, and the faint shimmer of magical wards. Someone else was interested in this bounty, and they were already here. The system chimed softly. Asterisk new objective, secure the battlefield essence before forces. Reward, unlock Bone Colossus blueprint. Time limit, 24 hours, asterisk. Leo stared at the interface, his mind racing. He had the resources to grow, but now he had competition. And with Sir Alaric's army approaching, the stakes had just gotten higher. The crypt's chill deepened as night fell, but Leo felt no cold. His skeletal frame, now reinforced with the essence of goblins and soldiers, hummed with anticipation. The blue interface of the Undying Legion System hovered before his mind's eye, displaying the objective in stark letters: secure battlefield essence within 24 hours. Reward, Bone Colossus blueprint. Below it, his resources glowed, 53 mana cores, enough for minor upgrades but far from the Colossus's cost. He needed more, and the battlefield promised a feast. Leo stood in the main chamber of the crypt, the Necropolis core pulsing with faint violet light at the center. Around him, his forces waited, 3 skeletal warriors, their bones etched with crude runes from recent upgrades, and the Wraith, a spectral figure that flickered in and out of visibility like a bad memory. Its form was a wisp of shadow and malice, perfect for the night's work. Through his mental link, Leo sensed the shade hovering near the surface, its ethereal eyes scanning the moonlit plains. The image it projected into his mind showed the battlefield, a sprawling valley littered with corpses, armor glinting under the stars, banners of 2 human kingdoms, the Golden Lion of Aranthia and the Silver Stag of Viridia, trampled into the mud. Hundreds of dead, their soul essence ripe for harvesting. But the shade's view also revealed movement, shadowy figures flitting between the bodies, rival undead scavengers with glowing eyes of green and crimson. Leo's jawbone tightened. He'd have to be quick. We move now, Leo commanded through the system, his thoughts translating into silent orders. The warriors clattered to attention, their empty sockets fixed on him. The Wraith hissed, a soundless whisper that chilled the air. Leo led them through the winding tunnels, his steps silent on the stone. As a skeleton, he moved with an unnatural grace, each motion calculated by his gamer's instincts. The crypt's passages were narrow and damp, carved by forgotten hands, but Leo had memorized every turn from his earlier scouting. He paused at a junction, the shade's feed showing the surface entrance clear. Scout ahead, he sent to the Wraith. It dissolved into shadow, seeping through cracks in the rock to survey the outside. Moments later, the Wraith's report came, a mental image of the night sky, clouds obscuring the moon, and the battlefield a half-mile distant. No living patrols in sight, but the rival undead were active, 3 figures that resembled gaunt, fleshless ghouls with elongated claws. They moved with predatory efficiency, tearing into corpses and absorbing faint wisps of light, soul essence. Leo's interface pinged, competition detected. Eliminate or evade? He chose evade for now. Time was of the essence, the Paladin's crusade could arrive at any moment. Emerging from the crypt, Leo felt the night air, dry and tinged with the metallic scent of blood. The battlefield lay in a shallow valley, visible as a dark smear against the grassland. He motioned his warriors forward, keeping low. The wraith floated beside him, a guardian against surprises. As they approached, the scale of the carnage struck Leo. Bodies were strewn in heaps, some still clutching weapons, others mangled by war machines. He saw young faces frozen in death, old veterans with grim expressions, and horses lying stiff-legged. A pang of something, remorse. No, he was beyond that now. This was a resource, a means to power. His system interface flared as he neared the first corpse, a knight in Aranthian plate. Absorb soul essence, prompted the system. Leo focused, and a pale blue light seeped from the body, flowing into his core. The mana core count ticked up, 54, 55. He moved to the next, a Viridian archer with an arrow in his throat. Essence flowed again. The process was swift, each absorption taking seconds, but with hundreds to harvest, it would be a long night. Leo split his forces. Warriors, guard the perimeter. Wraith, disrupt any rivals. The warriors took positions at the edges of the valley, their bony forms blending with the shadows. The wraith shot toward the ghoul-like undead, weaving between them with eerie speed. It didn't attack but emitted a low-frequency wail that disoriented them, buying time. Leo worked methodically, moving from corpse to corpse. His mind raced with calculations. Each body yielded 1 to 3 mana cores, depending on its strength in life. A knight gave 3, a foot soldier 1. He prioritized the knights, their essence richer. As he harvested, memories flickered, not his own, but fragments from the dead. A knight's last charge, an archer's fear, a general's regret. Leo shoved them aside, focusing on the numbers. 70 cores, 80, 90. The system chimed with each milestone, but he ignored it, driven by urgency. An hour passed, the moon peeking through clouds to cast silver light on the grisly scene. Leo had cleared a quarter of the battlefield, his core count soaring to 150. The rival undead, frustrated by the wraith's harassment, retreated to a distant ridge, watching with baleful eyes. Leo sensed their malice. They were weaker, perhaps minions of a local necromancer, but they could report back. He'd deal with them later. For now, the harvest continued. He reached a cluster of bodies around a fallen war banner, the golden lion torn. Here, the essence was thick, almost tangible. Leo absorbed it greedily, the mana cores climbing, 200, 250. A notification flashed, threshold reached. Bone Colossus blueprint unlocked. Cost, 500 mana cores. Leo's soul, or whatever passed for it, surged with triumph. The Colossus, a towering construct of bone and magic, would be a game-changer. But he needed more cores to build it. He pressed on, the night deepening. His warriors remained vigilant, but one signaled a warning, a flicker of movement to the east. Leo paused, accessing the shade's feed. It showed nothing alarming, just the plain stretching toward the crypt. He ordered the shade to expand its patrol, then returned to harvesting. By midnight, he'd reached 300 cores. Fatigue wasn't physical, his body didn't tire, but mental strain weighed on him. Coordinating multiple units, monitoring threats, and absorbing essence required intense focus. He allowed himself a moment, standing amidst the dead, the silence broken only by the wind. In his past life, as Leo the Gamer, he'd commanded armies in virtual worlds, but this was real, visceral. The stakes were survival, empire. He clenched his bony fists, the resolve hardening. Suddenly, the wraith shrieked a silent alarm. Leo snapped to attention. The rival undead were advancing, now 5 in number, their forms more defined, skeletal, with jagged spikes and glowing green eyes. They moved with purpose, ignoring the corpses and heading straight for Leo. Competition escalating, the system noted. Leo didn't hesitate. Engage. The wraith dove at the lead ghoul, its spectral claws tearing through bone. The ghoul retaliated with a blast of necrotic energy, but the wraith phased through it, disorienting the group. Leo sent his warriors charging. The battle was brief but brutal. His warriors, though outnumbered, fought with the precision he drilled into them, flanking, striking weak points. The wraith harried from above. Within minutes, the rivals lay shattered, their essence adding another 20 cores. Leo absorbed it, feeling a surge of power. Threat neutralized. Continue harvest. He worked faster, now at 350 cores. The battlefield was half cleared, but time was slipping away. The Shade's feed updated, a new alert. Leo focused, and the image shifted to show the crypt entrance, miles away. There, in the pre-dawn gloom, torches flickered. A column of knights, 20 strong, marched toward the crypt, led by a figure in gleaming armor that reflected the torchlight, Sir Alaric, the paladin. His sword glowed with a soft golden hue, holy aura radiating even through the Shade's view. They moved with discipline, setting up a camp at the crypt's mouth, tents rising, guards posted. The system pinged urgently, crusade detected. Prepare for assault at dawn. Leo's mind raced. He had to finish here and return. The Bone Colossus blueprint taunted him, so close, yet still 150 cores short. He scanned the remaining corpses, estimating another 100 if he hurried. Wraith, scout the Crusade's movements. Shade, maintain surveillance. The Wraith shot toward the crypt, while the Shade kept its eyes on the knights. Leo redoubled his efforts, harvesting with frantic speed. 400 cores, 420. The sky began to lighten in the east, a faint gray hinting at dawn. He was running out of time. As he reached a pile of bodies near a shattered catapult, he struck gold, a fallen general, his armor ornate, essence swirling thickly. Leo absorbed it, and the cores jumped to 480. Just 20 more. He moved to the last clusters, his warriors helping by dragging corpses closer. The final absorption, from a young squire, pushed him to 502. The system chimed triumphantly, Bone Colossus blueprint available. Construct. Leo saved it for later, construction would take time and cores he might need for defense. First, he had to get back. Retreat to the crypt, he ordered. The warriors formed up, and the Wraith returned, reporting the crusade fully encamped, knights praying or sharpening weapons. Leo led his force at a run, the grasslands blurring beneath their feet. As they neared the crypt, the Shade showed the camp in detail, Sir Alaric standing before a makeshift altar, his voice carrying on the wind, invoking blessings. 20 knights, all in heavy armor, looked determined. They'd attack at first light, and Leo's crypt, though fortified, was vulnerable. Slipping into the entrance, Leo felt a wave of relief, they'd made it unseen. But as he descended into the tunnels, the system flashed a final warning, Crusade camp established. Assault imminent at dawn. Objective, defend the Necropolis. In the main chamber, Leo assessed his resources, 502 mana cores, the Colossus blueprint, and his small force. He had hours to prepare. The Wraith hovered near, its form agitated. Outside, the first hints of sunrise tinged the sky. Leo stared at the Necropolis core, his mind already plotting defenses, traps, the deployment of his new blueprint. But for now, the cliffhanger loomed, the crusade was here, and dawn would bring bloodshed. The crypt had never felt so claustrophobic. Leo stood in the central chamber, his skeletal frame illuminated by the faint blue glow of the Necropolis core floating at the room's center. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient decay, but now it carried the electric hum of impending violence. Through the ethereal connection with his Shade, he watched the Crusaders camp at the entrance, 20 knights in polished armor, their campfires casting long shadows against the stone archway. Sir Alaric moved among them, his holy sword sheathed but radiating a palpable aura of divine energy that made Leo's bones ache even from this distance. Time is short, Leo thought, his mind racing with calculations. The system interface hovered before him, displaying his resources, 527 mana cores. A fortune earned from the battlefield harvest, but would it be enough? He focused on the blueprint menu, his bony fingers tracing through the options. Soul traps, defensive structures that would drain the life force of any living being passing through them. Cost, 50 cores each. He allocated 200 cores, creating 4 traps. The crypt shuddered as spectral energy coalesced in the main tunnels, forming shimmering, violet barriers that pulsed with malevolent intent. Next, he turned to his military. Summon skeletal warriors, he commanded. The system responded instantly, deducting 10 cores per warrior. 20 new warriors materialized from the crypt's shadows, their bones clicking into place with eerie precision. They stood in ranks, empty eye sockets fixed on Leo, awaiting orders. He positioned them at choke points, 10 in the narrow entrance tunnel, 5 in the central chamber as a reserve, and 5 guarding the Necropolis core itself. Their rusted weapons gleamed dully in the blue light. But warriors alone wouldn't hold against holy knights. Leo accessed the Wraith blueprint. Cost, 30 cores each. He spent 90 cores to summon 3 Wraiths, ethereal, ghostly forms that drifted through the air, their whispers echoing with promises of torment. Harass and disrupt, he instructed them. Target their morale, their senses. Make them fear the dark. The wraiths vanished into the tunnels, their presence leaving trails of frost on the stone walls. As he worked, the system chimed with a new notification. A quest prompt appeared in glowing text. Quest, defend the Necropolis. Objective, repel the Crusader assault and protect your core. Rewards, 200 mana cores, unlock, skeletal mage evolution, blueprint, bone colossus, discounted. Failure, destruction of core results in system termination. Leo's non-existent heart would have skipped a beat. The rewards were substantial, the mage evolution would grant him spellcasting abilities, and the colossus blueprint was his ticket to true power. But the failure condition, termination. Not just death, but the end of his second chance. He accepted the quest without hesitation, the weight of it settling into his very bones. He turned his attention back to the Shade's feed. The knights were preparing. Sir Alaric gathered them around a map spread on a makeshift table, his voice carrying through the psychic link. The crypt has 3 main tunnels converging here, Alaric said, pointing. Brother Marcus, take 5 men down the left passage. Sister Ilera, 5 down the right. I'll lead the main force through the center. Our objective is the undead core, destroy it, and the abominations fall. Leo watched, analyzing. The paladin was competent, dividing his forces to flank and overwhelm. But he was underestimating the terrain. The crypt tunnels were narrow, limiting the knight's mobility, and Leo had studied every inch through his shades. He adjusted his defenses, moving 5 warriors from the central chamber to reinforce the side tunnels. The soul traps were placed at key intersections, 2 in the center tunnel, 1 in each side passage. Hours passed in tense preparation. Leo paced the chamber, his thoughts a whirlwind of strategy. He remembered his gaming days, the countless hours spent in real-time strategy matches, micromanaging units, predicting enemy movements. This was no game, but the principles held true. Defense in depth, attrition, psychological warfare. He sent a wraith to the entrance, just close enough to let its chilling whispers drift into the camp. He heard a knight gasp, "Did you hear that?" Like, crying. Good. Let them sleep uneasily. As the first hints of dawn painted the sky gray outside, the Crusaders stirred. Leo watched through the shade as they donned their armor, checked weapons, and offered prayers to their gods. Sir Alaric raised his sword, its blade igniting with holy fire. For the light. For the living, he roared, and the knights echoed the cry, their voices ringing with fervor. They charged into the crypt. The first wave hit the soul traps in the center tunnel. 2 knights in the lead screamed as violet energy lashed out, draining their vitality. One collapsed, his armor clattering against stone, the other staggered back, pale and weakened. Traps! Alaric shouted. Advance with caution. Holy shields! The knights raised their shields, glowing with divine protection, and pressed forward, the trap's effects diminished but not nullified. In the side tunnels, similar scenes unfolded. Brother Marcus's group triggered a soul trap, losing 1 knight instantly. Sister Ilera's team fared better, her prayers bolstering their resistance. But as they advanced, Leo's warriors struck. From shadowed alcoves, skeletal forms lunged, their weapons hacking at armored legs. The narrow space worked to Leo's advantage, the knights couldn't form proper ranks, and their holy attacks were hampered by the close quarters. Clashes of steel on bone echoed through the crypt, accompanied by shouts and the sickening crunch of breaking skeletons. Leo monitored it all through multiple shade feeds, his mind processing the battle in real time. He lost warriors quickly, 3 in the left tunnel, 2 in the right, but they took a knight with them, and the essence flowed back to him through the system, replenishing a handful of cores. He directed his wraiths. One drifted into the center tunnel, its form weaving through the knights. It whispered directly into Alaric's ear, "Your faith is a lie, your god abandoned you." The paladin faltered for a moment, his holy flame flickering, before shaking it off with a snarl. But the other knights weren't as strong-willed, one broke formation, swinging his sword at empty air, screaming about ghosts. The battle intensified. Alaric's main force reached the central chamber, cutting down the remaining warriors there. Leo watched from the rear, near the Necropolis core. He had kept 5 warriors as his personal guard, and they stood between him and the approaching knights. The chamber was larger, allowing the Crusaders to spread out. 10 knights remained, including Alaric, their armor dented but their resolve unbroken. There. Alaric pointed his flaming sword at Leo. The master of this filth. Destroy him. The knights charged, but Leo was ready. He'd saved one final trick. As they crossed the chamber, he activated the last soul trap, hidden beneath the stone floor. Violet tendrils erupted, ensnaring 3 knights, draining them dry. They fell, their essence surging into Leo, but the others pressed on. His warriors engaged, buying seconds. Bone swords clashed against holy steel, and skeletons shattered one by one. Leo backed toward the core, his mind racing. He had wraiths left, 2 were still harassing the side tunnels, but he recalled them. They swept into the chamber, their cold presence slowing the knights, but Alaric's holy fire burned one away into nothingness. Then it was just Leo, his last 2 warriors, and Sir Alaric with 4 remaining knights. The paladin's eyes burned with righteous fury. Your evil ends here, monster, he spat, advancing. Leo's warriors fell, and the knights closed in, forming a semicircle around him and the glowing core. Alaric raised his sword, the holy light blazing so brightly it hurt Leo's senses. In the name of the light, I purge you, he roared, and charged directly at Leo, his knights following. Cliffhanger, the first wave had broken through his traps, and now the paladin confronted Leo directly, holy sword descending toward his skull. The holy sword descended in a blinding arc of golden light, aimed directly at Leo's skull. Time seemed to stretch, the world narrowing to that gleaming edge, the paladin's triumphant roar, the stench of death and sanctity mingling in the crypt's damp air. Leo's skeletal form, fragile and exposed in the chamber's center, had no time to dodge. But his mind, sharpened by countless hours of virtual warfare, was already 3 steps ahead. He didn't need to move. He commanded. As Sir Alaric's blade cut through the air, 2 wraiths materialized from the shadows behind him, ethereal forms of shifting mist and cold malice, purchased with the last of Leo's manacores before the assault. They didn't attack the paladin directly, instead, they swept through the 3 knights flanking him, their ghostly touch draining warmth and will. One knight stumbled, his armor clattering as he fell to his knees, gasping. Another dropped his sword, eyes wide with terror. The third managed a weak swing that passed harmlessly through the wraith's form. The distraction was enough. Leo's skeletal body, controlled through the Undying Legion System's interface that hovered in his vision like a blue-tinged hologram, rolled to the side with a clatter of bones. The holy sword struck the stone floor where his skull had been, sending sparks flying and carving a deep gash into the rock. The impact reverberated through the chamber, shaking loose dust from the ceiling. Abomination. Alaric snarled, his face flushed beneath his helmet. He wrenched his sword free, its divine glow illuminating the grim scene. Around them, chaos reigned. Leo's skeletal warriors, 12 of them, summoned in the hours before dawn, clashed with the remaining knights in the narrow tunnels leading to the chamber. The sound of steel on bone echoed like a macabre orchestra. Soul traps, spectral devices Leo had embedded in the walls, flared with violet energy whenever a knight passed too close, sapping their strength and slowing their advance. But the Crusaders were disciplined, fighting in tight formations, their holy symbols warding off the worst of the undead assaults. Leo's consciousness, housed in the fragile skeleton, assessed the battlefield with cold precision. The system interface displayed real-time data, enemy knights, 14 remaining. Skeletal warriors, 7 active. Wraiths, 2 active. Manacores, 3, he was running dangerously low on resources. The paladin was the key, his essence, rich with holy energy, would be a massive boost. But Alaric was no fool. He moved with the grace of a seasoned warrior, his armor gleaming even in the crypt's gloom, his eyes fixed on Leo with fanatical intensity. You cannot hide in the shadows forever, Alaric declared, advancing slowly. He gestured with his free hand, and a soft golden light spread from his palm, pushing back the darkness. The wraiths hissed and retreated, their forms flickering. This place will be purified by the dawn's truth. Leo didn't respond, he couldn't, his skeletal jaws incapable of speech. But in his mind, he was already plotting. The system had provided a map of the crypt, and he focused on a side tunnel to the left, partially collapsed and littered with debris. It led to a smaller chamber he'd scouted earlier, one with unstable ceilings and a narrow entrance. A perfect trap. He sent a mental command. 2 of his remaining skeletal warriors broke from their engagements and shuffled toward Alaric, their bone swords raised. They were fodder, meant to delay. The paladin cut them down with efficient strokes, his holy sword shearing through bone like parchment. But with each kill, Leo gained a trickle of essence, manacores, 5, not enough for a new unit, but enough for a gamble. As Alaric dispatched the second warrior, Leo turned and fled, not toward the crypt's depths, but into the side tunnel. His bones clacked against the stone, a frantic rhythm. Behind him, Alaric's boots thudded in pursuit. Running? I expected more from a creature that defies the natural order. The tunnel was tight, forcing Alaric to stoop slightly. The golden light from his sword cast long, dancing shadows on the rough walls. Leo moved as fast as his brittle legs could carry him, his mind racing. He could feel the system's presence, a constant hum in his consciousness, offering options: blueprint available, Bone Colossus, 50 mana cores. Upgrade available, Necropolis core, 20 mana cores. Both were out of reach. But there was another tab, one he'd barely explored: environmental manipulation, cost, 5 mana cores. He reached the smaller chamber, a circular room with a high ceiling crisscrossed with cracks. Ancient pillars, worn smooth by time, supported the weight above. In the center lay a pile of rubble from a previous collapse. Leo stopped, turning to face the entrance. Alaric emerged, his armor scraping against the stone frame, his breath coming in heavy puffs. "Nowhere left to run," he said, raising his sword. "Accept your end with dignity, monster." Leo's skeletal hands lifted, not in surrender, but in a deliberate gesture. He activated environmental manipulation. The system interface flashed, and his last mana cores drained to 0. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low rumble filled the chamber. The cracks in the ceiling widened, dust sifting down like gray snow. Alaric's eyes widened. What trickery is this? He lunged forward, but Leo was already moving, darting behind one of the pillars. The paladin's sword struck the stone, sending chips flying. The rumble grew louder, becoming a deafening groan. Leo had targeted the weakest point in the ceiling, above the pile of rubble. With a final, shuddering crack, a section of the roof gave way. Boulders and debris crashed down, not on Leo, but between him and Alaric. The paladin tried to retreat, but a falling stone caught his leg, pinning him to the ground. He cried out in pain, his holy sword clattering from his grasp. The chamber filled with dust, reducing visibility to a hazy fog. Leo emerged from behind the pillar, unharmed. He approached slowly, his empty eye sockets fixed on the trapped knight. Alaric struggled, his muscles straining against the weight of the rock. Blood seeped from his leg, staining his white tabard. You planned this," he gasped, his voice filled with disbelief. A mindless undead shouldn't be capable of such strategy. Leo stood over him, his skeletal form silhouetted against the dust-moted light. In his mind, he felt a flicker of something, not pity, but recognition. Alaric was a warrior, dedicated to his cause, much like Leo had been in his gaming days. But this was survival. He reached down, his bone fingers closing around the paladin's throat. The system prompted, absorb soul essence. Y/N. He chose Y. A surge of energy flowed from Alaric into Leo. It was different from the goblin or the soldiers, richer, purer, laced with a holy fervor that burned like cold fire. The paladin's eyes glazed over, his body going limp. Golden motes of light drifted from his form, absorbed into Leo's bones. The system chimed, essence absorbed, paladin grade. Mana cores, 45. Bonus unlocked, holy resistance plus 10%. Leo released the corpse, stepping back. The chamber fell silent except for the settling dust. Through his mental link, he sensed the rest of the battle. With their leader fallen, the remaining knights had lost heart. His wraiths harried them as they retreated through the tunnels, leaving behind their dead. The system updated, enemy knights, 5 retreating. Skeletal warriors, 3 active. Wraiths, 2 active. Quest complete, defend the Necropolis. Rewards, 50 mana cores, evolution unlocked. His total mana cores now stood at 95. More than enough. He returned to the main chamber, his bones aching from the strain of the fight. The crypt was a mess, shattered skeletons, discarded weapons, the lingering scent of blood and ozone. His few remaining warriors stood motionless, awaiting orders. The wraiths drifted in the shadows, their forms solidified by the feast of fear. Leo focused on the system. The evolution option glowed brightly, evolved to skeletal mage, cost, 90 mana cores. Benefits, spellcasting abilities, enhanced intelligence, mana regeneration. Without hesitation, he selected it. A wave of power washed over him. His bones began to change, not in shape, but in substance. They darkened to a deep ebony, etched with faint silver runes that glowed with inner light. A crown of spectral energy formed around his skull, and in his ribcage, a pulsing heart of violet mana took shape. Knowledge flooded his mind, spells of necromancy, curses, elemental manipulation. He could feel mana flowing through him, a cool, dark river. The system confirmed, evolution complete. Skeletal Mage achieved. New abilities, Shadow Bolt, Bone Shield, Soul Drain. He raised a hand, and a sphere of crackling darkness coalesced in his palm. With a thought, he sent it hurtling into a wall, where it exploded in a shower of shadows and stone chips. A smile, impossible for his skeletal face, formed in his mind. He was no longer just a pile of bones, he was a force. But his triumph was short-lived. The system interface flickered, then displayed a new alert in bold red letters, Kingdom Alert, Major Threat Detected. The human kingdoms of Lithos and Valyrium have issued a joint decree. Target, Undead Commander in the Eastern Crypts. Status, Priority Extermination. Estimated response time, 7 days. Leo's mana heart pulsed with cold dread. He had survived the crusade, but he had drawn the attention of kings. The War of Kings was no longer just a background conflict, he was now a player on the board, and the living intended to remove him from the game. He looked around the crypt, at his scattered forces, at the potential it held. 7 days. Enough time to expand, to prepare. But the stakes had just been raised to empire-breaking heights. He issued commands through the system. His warriors began clearing the debris, collecting usable materials. His wraiths were sent to scout the surface, to monitor the retreating knights and watch for new movements. Leo himself retreated to the Necropolis core, the glowing crystal that served as his base's heart. As he channeled mana into it, planning his next moves, the alert continued to blink in his vision, a constant reminder. The hidden crypt was no longer hidden. And the world was coming for him. The crypt had grown too small. Leo felt it in the marrow of his newly evolved bones, a restlessness that had nothing to do with the lingering ache from Sir Alaric's holy blade. He stood in the central chamber, now more a throne room than a tomb. The walls, once rough-hewn stone, were etched with faint, glowing runes that pulsed with the same blue energy as his system interface. Before him, the Necropolis core, a floating, obsidian sphere the size of a human head, hummed softly, its surface swirling with captured soul essence. 7 days. The system's alert hung in his mind like a tolling bell, Kingdom Alert, joint decree issued by the human kingdoms of Valyrius and Karth. Target, Undead Entity designated Bone Lord. Extermination ordered within 7 days. Estimated force, 500 plus combined troops, Leo's skeletal fingers, now longer, more articulated, tipped with faintly glowing mana, traced the air. A flick of his wrist brought up his interface. The familiar blue panels floated before his eyes, but they had changed since his evolution to Skeletal Mage. New tabs glimmered, Spell Library, Arcane Research, Territory Management. He ignored them for now, focusing on the map. Shade units deployed, 4, Scouting Radius, 15 miles. He sent a mental command. Through the eyes of Shade 3, he saw the world in monochrome blues and grays. The crypt's entrance was a jagged maw in a hillside, overlooking a forest of twisted, leafless trees. Beyond lay the scarred lands of the War of Kings, burned villages, trampled fields, and the ever-present stench of decay. But Shade 3 was flying north, toward the foothills of the Iron Peak Mountains. New region detected, Verdant Valley. Resources, iron deposits, medium, fertile soil, high, freshwater river, abundant. Current controller, Human Lord Edric of House Thorn. Garrison, approximately 50 soldiers, 10 knights, wooden fortifications, Leo's mind, still so human in its patterns, raced. A valley. Defensible. Rich in resources. Perfect for expansion. But 50 soldiers? With his current forces, a direct assault would be costly. He had 23 skeletal warriors, 5 wraiths, and the single bone colossus he'd unlocked after the battlefield harvest. The colossus was impressive, 30 feet tall, assembled from the bones of warhorses and fallen giants, its hollow eye sockets burning with blue fire, but it was slow, lumbering. Not ideal for a swift strike. System notification, new blueprint unlocked, Soul Forge, building. Cost, 500 mana cores. Effect, enhances undead units with soul-infused armor and weapons. Requires, 1000 soul essence per enhancement session, Leo glanced at his reserves. Asterisk Manacores, 620. Soul Essence, 850. Asterisk He'd gained a windfall from Alaric and the Fallen Knights, but it wasn't enough. Not for the forge, and not for the army he'd need to take the valley. He needed more essence. More cores. Scout the valley's perimeter, he whispered, the words a dry rasp that echoed in the chamber. Find weaknesses. Patrol routes. Anything. Shade 3 banked, its ethereal form slipping through the canopy of pine trees that crowned the valley's rim. Below, Leo saw it, Verdant Valley lived up to its name. Even in the dead of winter, the grass held a stubborn green hue, fed by hot springs that steamed along the riverbanks. A wooden palisade surrounded a central keep, Lord Edric's seat, and watchtowers dotted the slopes. Soldiers moved in small groups, their breaths puffing white in the cold air. They looked disciplined, but weary. The War of Kings had drained everyone. Asterisk weak point detected, Northern Pass. Guarded by 2 soldiers, 4-hour rotations. Terrain, narrow, rocky. Ideal for ambush, asterisk. Leo allowed himself a grim approximation of a smile. His jawbone creaked. Ambush. That he could do. But first, the Soul Forge. If he could enhance even a handful of warriors, they'd cut through human steel like parchment. He withdrew from Shade 3's vision and turned to the Necropolis core. System. Begin construction of Soul Forge. Designate location, adjacent chamber, east wall. Asterisk confirmed. Deducting 500 manacores. Construction time, 6 hours. Soul essence required for activation, 1000. Current essence, 850. Deficit, 150, asterisk. The core pulsed, and a stream of blue energy shot from it, piercing the wall to the east. Stone groaned and reshaped itself, forming an archway into a new room. Within, spectral scaffolds began to form, outlining a furnace-like structure with bellows of shimmering ether. Leo watched, fascinated. Even after months in this undead body, the system's power never ceased to amaze him. It was like playing the ultimate real-time strategy game, only the stakes were his very existence. He needed that extra essence. Now. Shade 4, he commanded. Scout south. Find a source of essence, recent battles, mass graves, anything. Through Shade 4's eyes, he swept over blighted forests and frozen creeks. Nothing. Then, as the shade crested a ridge, Leo saw them. Movements in the shadows. Not human. Figures clad in tattered black robes, moving with unnatural grace through a moonlit clearing. Their skin was pale as milk, their eyes glinting red. They gathered around a stone altar stained dark with old blood. At their head stood a tall, elegant man with silver hair and a cloak of night-black velvet. He held a goblet, drinking deeply. When he lowered it, his lips were smeared crimson. Vampires. Leo's mind recoiled. In life, he'd read fantasy novels, played games with vampire lords as end bosses. But seeing them here, real and predatory, sent a chill through his bone spine. There were a dozen of them, plus twice as many thralls, zombie-like humans with blank eyes and stumbling gaits. Asterisk rival undead faction detected, Coven of Lord Valerius, Vampire Lord. Numbers, 12 vampires, 24 thralls. Activity, ritual gathering. Location, 8 miles south of crypt. Threat level, high, asterisk. The silver-haired vampire, Valerius, presumably, raised his head, as if sensing the shade's presence. His red eyes narrowed. He murmured something, and a bat, larger than any natural creature, detached from the shadows and shot upward. Shade 4 dodged, but the bat was fast. It screeched, a sound that tore at the shade's ethereal form. Leo severed the connection just as the bat's claws raked through the shade's substance. The unit dissipated with a silent scream. Asterisk Shade 4 destroyed. Cause, Vampiric Scout Bat, asterisk. Leo staggered back, his bony hand gripping the edge of the Necropolis core for support. Damn it. He'd lost a shade. And worse, he'd been seen. Or at least, his scrying had been detected. For hours, he paced the crypt, his mind working. The vampires were a problem. A big one. They were undead, like him, but different, flesh and blood, not bone and magic. Would the system consider them allies? Enemies? Resources? System query, can vampire essence be harvested? Asterisk answer, vampires possess corrupted soul essence, usable but at 50% efficiency. Thrall essence, 25% efficiency. Note, vampire factions often hostile to skeletal undead due to territorial disputes, asterisk. So. Not allies. And harvesting them would be less fruitful. But they were here, in his territory. Or what he considered his territory. He returned to his planning. The valley was the priority. He needed those resources. With the Soul Forge, he could enhance his warriors, then strike at the northern pass. A quick, brutal assault under cover of darkness. But he'd have to move before the 7-day deadline, and before the vampires decided to interfere. As dawn approached, a faint gray light filtering through cracks in the crypt's ceiling, the Soul Forge completed its construction. Leo entered the new chamber. The forge dominated the space, a great furnace of dark iron and glowing runes, with an anvil of black stone at its heart. Tendrils of soul essence, drawn from the Necropolis core, swirled in its belly. System. Enhance 5 skeletal warriors. Prioritize weapons and armor. Asterisk confirmed. Deducting 1000 soul essence. Enhancement process beginning, asterisk. The forge roared to life. Blue flames licked up, and 5 of Leo's warriors stepped forward, their empty eye sockets fixed on the anvil. One by one, they laid their rusted swords and cracked shields upon it. The flames engulfed them, and when they emerged, the weapons were transformed, blades of darkened steel edged with spectral energy, shields reinforced with bone plating that shimmered with a faint blue aura. The warriors themselves seemed taller, their bones thicker, with jagged spurs of hardened soul stuff at their joints. Asterisk enhanced skeletal warriors created. Stats increased, damage plus 50%, defense plus 75%. Special ability, Soul Strike, weapons deal minor spirit damage, asterisk. It was a start. But Leo's essence reserves were now critically low, soul essence, 0, mana cores, 120, he'd need to harvest more from the valley after the attack. He gathered his forces in the main chamber. The enhanced warriors stood at the front, their new weapons gleaming. Behind them, the regular warriors clattered their bones. The wraiths drifted near the ceiling, their forms shifting like smoke. The bone colossus waited in a side tunnel, too large to fit in the chamber, its presence a constant, heavy thrum through the stone. We move tonight, Leo said, his voice echoing. Target, Verdant Valley, Northern Pass. Objective, eliminate guards, secure pass, then advance on the keep. Harvest all essence encountered. Speed is crucial. The humans must not have time to rally. He was about to issue detailed orders when Shade 2, scouting the crypt's immediate vicinity, sent an urgent pulse. Asterisk approach detected. Single entity. Undead signature. High level. Moving toward entrance, asterisk. Leo froze. He sent a command to the warriors, positions. Hide the enhanced ones. Now. They scrambled, melting into shadows. Leo himself retreated to a niche behind the Necropolis core, cloaking his mana signature as best he could. He peered through the eyes of Shade 2. A figure walked calmly up the hillside toward the crypt entrance. It was a vampire, not Valerius, but another, younger-looking with slick-back black hair and a tailored coat of deep purple. He moved with effortless poise, stepping over roots and rocks as if they weren't there. In his hand, he carried a rolled scroll sealed with wax the color of dried blood. The vampire stopped at the entrance. He didn't call out. Instead, he simply waited, his red eyes scanning the darkness within. Leo weighed his options. Attack? Diplomacy? Ignore him? The vampire was alone, but that meant nothing, he could be a decoy, or powerful enough to handle himself. Curiosity won. Leo sent a mental nudge to 2 regular warriors. They stepped out of the shadows, their bones clacking, and blocked the entrance. The vampire didn't flinch. He smiled, revealing sharp canines. I come as an emissary of Lord Valerius, master of the Crimson Coven. I seek audience with the one who commands this, nest of bones. His voice was smooth, cultured, with a faint accent that Leo couldn't place. It grated on him. In life, he'd hated arrogance, and this vampire dripped with it. Leo remained hidden, but he projected his voice through the crypt's acoustics, making it seem to come from everywhere. Speak. The emissary's smile widened. Lord Valerius welcomes a new power in these lands. The War of Kings has left much, unattended. He proposes an alliance. Together, our forces could crush the human lords, claim their territories, and feast on their fear. He unrolled the scroll. It was a map, drawn in what looked like blood, showing the region. Valerius's claimed territory was marked in red, overlapping with Leo's scouted areas. Lord Valerius offers you the valley to the north, Verdant Valley. In return, you swear fealty to him, provide troops for his campaigns, and hand over a tithe of soul essence monthly. Leo's fury was cold, calculating. Fealty. Tithe. This vampire thought he could command him. After all he'd built, after evolving, after defeating a paladin. The arrogance was staggering. But he kept his voice even. And if I refuse? The emissary's smile vanished. Then Lord Valerius will consider you a rival. And rivals are removed. You have until tomorrow sunset to decide. He re-rolled the scroll and tossed it into the crypt. It landed at the warrior's feet. Think wisely, bone thing. The night is long, but our patience is short. With that, he turned and walked away, fading into the trees as if he'd never been there. Leo emerged from his hiding place. He picked up the scroll. The wax seal bore a crest, a bat over a goblet. He crushed it in his hand, the parchment crumbling to dust. Asterisk cliffhanger, the system pinged, a new alert. But before Leo could check it, a low, guttural growl echoed from the deepest tunnels of the crypt. Something was moving down there. Something old, and hungry, and very, very angry, asterisk. The crypt's main chamber, once a hollowed-out cavern of crumbling stone and scattered bones, had transformed under Leo's command. The air hummed with spectral energy, casting a pale blue glow across the newly erected soul forge. The structure, a towering construct of dark iron and pulsating soul crystals, stood against one wall, its furnaces burning with ethereal flames that consumed essence rather than wood. Skeletal warriors, now enhanced by the forge's power, stood at attention, their bones reinforced with dark metal plating, their eye sockets glowing with a fiercer crimson light. Leo, his skeletal form now clad in tattered mage robes that whispered with arcane energy, paced before the forge, his mind racing with plans for the assault on Verdant Valley. A sudden chill swept through the chamber, one that had nothing to do with the crypt's natural dampness. The ambient hum of the soul forge faltered, and the skeletal warriors shifted uneasily, their bony fingers tightening on weapons. From the shadows of the entrance tunnel, a figure emerged, tall, pale, and clad in elegant black robes that seemed to drink the light. It moved with an unnatural grace, its feet barely touching the ground. This was the vampire emissary, its eyes a deep crimson that matched the warrior's sockets, but with a predatory intelligence that set Leo on edge. Behind it trailed a faint mist, carrying the scent of old blood and decay. Leo halted his pacing, his skeletal hands clenching. He had expected this visit after his Shades report, but the reality of facing a vampire, a creature of legend in his old world, sent a jolt of adrenaline through his non-existent veins. The system interface flickered at the edge of his vision, displaying a notification, Vampire Emissary detected. Threat level, moderate. Species, Nosferatu. Affiliation, Lord Valerius's Coven. He dismissed it with a mental command, focusing on the emissary. I am Kalen, emissary of Lord Valerius, master of the Crimson Moon Coven, the vampire said, its voice a smooth, melodious baritone that echoed unnaturally in the chamber. It bowed slightly, a gesture that felt more mocking than respectful. You are the one they call the Bone Lord. A curious title for a pile of animated bones. Leo's jawbone tightened. He had no lungs to breathe, but he forced a calm tone through the magic that animated his voice. I am Leo. And this is my domain. State your business, vampire. Kalen's lips curled into a faint smile, revealing sharp fangs. Direct. I appreciate that. Lord Valerius has observed your activities. Your defeat of the Paladins' crusade did not go unnoticed. The human kingdoms grow restless, and their kings are fools squabbling over scraps. Valerius sees an opportunity. He offers an alliance. Leo's mind raced. An alliance? With vampires? The system had warned of rival undead factions, but this was more direct than he anticipated. He gestured to a stone slab that served as a makeshift table. Explain. Kalen glided forward, ignoring the wary skeletal warriors. Verdant Valley is rich in resources, iron, timber, fertile land. Lord Edric, the human who controls it, is weak, his forces depleted by the War of Kings. Valerius desires the valley for his coven's expansion. But a direct assault would alert the human kingdoms, potentially uniting them against us. You, however, have already drawn their ire. Attack the valley, draw their forces. Valerius will support you from the shadows, and once it is taken, we shall share the spoils. Together, we can crush the human armies piece by piece. Leo listened, his skeletal fingers tapping against his robe. The offer was tempting, a chance to gain a powerful ally and secure the valley with less risk. But suspicion gnawed at him. The system's logs had hinted at treachery among undead factions, and vampires were notorious for betrayal in the stories he remembered. He leaned forward, his eye sockets fixed on Kalen. And what does Valerius gain from this, besides the valley? Why not take it himself if he's so powerful? Kalen's smile widened. Perceptive. Valerius values efficiency. Your unique abilities with essence absorption and unit creation are of interest. He proposes a partnership beyond this single valley. With your forces and his coven's ancient knowledge, we could dominate this continent. But first, prove your worth. Take Verdant Valley, and we shall discuss further. Leo's thoughts churned. The vampire's words were too smooth, too calculated. He recalled the previous chapter's cliffhanger, the mysterious growl from the crypt's depths. Was that connected? Or was this simply a ploy to use him as a pawn? The system flashed another notification, analysis, vampire offer contains 78% probability of deception. Recommended action, refusal. He trusted the system's calculations, they had saved him before. He stood, his robes rustling. I refuse. I build my empire alone. Tell Valerius to keep his shadows to himself. Kalen's expression darkened, the pleasant facade melting away. A foolish choice, Bone Lord. Valerius does not take refusal lightly. If you will not be an ally, you will be an enemy. And enemies of the Crimson Moon Coven do not last long. The air grew colder, and the mist around him thickened, coalescing into spectral shapes that hissed softly. Leo didn't hesitate. He had been preparing for this moment. As a skeletal mage, he had unlocked new spells through the system, and now was the time to test them. He raised a bony hand, chanting words of power that echoed with necrotic energy. Bone Shard Barrage. From the ground, fragments of bone erupted, sharpening into projectiles that shot toward Kalen. The vampire moved with blinding speed, dodging most of the shards, but one grazed his arm, drawing black blood that sizzled on the stone floor. He snarled, his eyes glowing brighter. You dare. He lunged, claws extended, but Leo was ready. He cast, Spectral Shield, a barrier of blue energy that flared to life, deflecting the attack. The impact sent shockwaves through the chamber, causing the soul forge to shudder. Warriors, attack. Leo commanded, and the enhanced skeletal warriors surged forward, their metal-plated bones clanking. Kalen hissed, dissolving into mist to evade them, but Leo followed with Soul Drain, a spell that targeted the essence within undead creatures. The mist recoiled, reforming into Kalen, who staggered, his form flickering. This isn't over, Leo, Kalen spat, his voice strained. Valerius will come for you. And when he does, you will wish you had accepted our offer. With a final glare, he dissolved into the mist again, retreating down the tunnel and vanishing into the darkness. Leo lowered his hand, the energy of the spells fading. The chamber fell silent, save for the hum of the soul forge. He turned to his warriors, assessing the damage, minimal, but the message was clear, war with the vampires was inevitable. The system updated, quest updated, defend against vampire coven. Threat level, high. Timeframe, unknown. He pushed the thought aside. First, he needed the resources of Verdant Valley to bolster his forces. Over the next few hours, Leo finalized his plans. Using his shades, he had scouted the valley extensively. Lord Edric's forces consisted of 100 human soldiers, mostly infantry with a few archers, stationed in a wooden fort at the valley's heart. The terrain was open, with few natural defenses, perfect for the blitzkrieg tactics he had mastered in his gaming days. He summoned his commanders, 2 wraiths, their ethereal forms whispering strategies, and the newly constructed bone Colossus. The Colossus was a marvel of necromantic engineering, 30 feet tall, assembled from the bones of giants and fallen beasts, its frame reinforced with dark iron from the soul forge. It stood in the crypt's largest chamber, its hollow eye sockets glowing with a baleful green light. Leo approached it, placing a hand on its massive foot. You are the key to this assault, he murmured. Show them the might of the Undying Legion. As night fell, Leo led his forces to the surface. The moon was a sliver in the sky, casting faint light over the landscape. His army moved silently, 50 enhanced skeletal warriors, 10 wraiths, and the bone colossus, its footsteps shaking the earth. They marched toward Verdant Valley, a dark tide under the stars. Leo rode atop the colossus, his mage robes billowing in the cold wind. His mind was a whirlwind of tactics: flank here, crush there, absorb essence quickly. They reached the valley's edge by midnight. Below, the human fort was illuminated by torchlight, soldiers patrolling the walls. Leo gave the command. Wraiths, disrupt their communications. Warriors, advance on the east flank. Colossus, with me, we break the gate. The attack began with terrifying speed. The wraiths swept down, their spectral forms passing through walls, causing panic as they whispered curses and extinguished torches. The skeletal warriors charged from the east, their enhanced bones deflecting arrows as they clashed with the human infantry. Chaos erupted in the fort. Leo guided the colossus toward the main gate. The giant construct raised a massive fist, bones grinding, and slammed it into the wooden barrier. The gate splintered with a deafening crash. Human soldiers screamed, scattering as the colossus stomped into the courtyard, its every step crushing stone and flesh. Leo leaped down, casting Necrotic Blast, a wave of dark energy that withered the life from a group of archers. Essence flowed into him, fueling his mana. Lord Edric emerged from the keep, a portly man in chainmail, his face pale with fear. "Monster! You'll pay for this," he shouted, rallying a dozen guards. They charged, but Leo was ready. He summoned Bone Prison, spikes erupting from the ground to trap them, then absorbed their essence as they fell. Edric turned to flee, but a skeletal warrior intercepted him, its blade at his throat. "Surrender the valley," Leo said, his voice echoing coldly. Edric trembled. "I yield. Just spare my people." Leo nodded. "Your soldiers will be absorbed. The civilians may live, under my rule." It was a strategic decision, keeping some alive to work the resources. He turned to oversee the cleanup, the system notifying him of essence gains and territory claimed. The battle had lasted less than an hour, a flawless blitzkrieg. As dawn approached, Leo stood on the fort's walls, looking over Verdant Valley now shrouded in mist. The resources were his: iron mines, timberlands, fertile fields. His forces were securing the area, absorbing the fallen soldier's essence. The soul forge back at the crypt would have plenty to work with. But his triumph was short-lived. A shade materialized beside him, its form flickering urgently. It conveyed a message through the system's link: Scout report, vampire army detected. Location, 10 miles north, marching toward Verdant Valley. Composition, 200 vampire thralls, 50 night creatures, led by Lord Valerius. Estimated arrival, 12 hours. Leo's eye sockets narrowed. Valerius hadn't waited, he was coming to take what Leo had just won. The cliffhanger loomed, the vampire lord's forces were on the move, and Leo's army, though victorious, was weary and scattered. He clenched his bony fists, the weight of the coming conflict settling upon him. The valley was his, but holding it would be another battle entirely. The valley was quiet in the twilight, but Leo felt no peace. Standing atop the newly constructed watchtower overlooking Verdant Valley, he surveyed the land he had claimed just days before. The air still carried the faint scent of blood and burnt wood from Lord Edric's defeat, a reminder of how quickly fortunes could change in this war-torn world. Below him, skeletal workers moved with eerie efficiency, reinforcing the palisades that now ringed the valley's entrance. Their bony fingers dug into the earth, setting sharpened stakes and weaving dark energy into the barriers, a crude but effective defense against the living. Yet Leo knew the coming threat was not of the living. His mind, still adjusting to the cold logic of his skeletal form, raced with calculations. The vampire Lord Valerius would not take his refusal lightly. The emissary Kaelin's parting threat echoed in his memory: Valerius does not offer alliances twice. Leo's interface, the Undying Legion System, hovered before his vision, a familiar blue grid of options and data. It had been his salvation since awakening in that mass grave, and now it was his greatest tool. But as he scanned the valley, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him from beyond the system's code. "Master," a rasping voice called from below. It was Grath, one of his first skeletal warriors, now upgraded with sharper bones and a faint glow of necrotic energy. "The southern perimeter is secure. The soul traps are active." Leo nodded, a gesture that felt unnatural without flesh. "Good. Double the patrols. I want no surprises when night falls. As Grath shuffled away, Leo focused on the system. His essence reserves, harvested from Edric's fallen soldiers, were substantial but not infinite. He had spent much on fortifications, soul traps that would drain the life force of any intruder, spectral wards to detect magical incursions, and a network of shades patrolling the skies. But the vampires were cunning, ancient predators who knew how to hunt in darkness. He needed something more. He navigated the system's menus, his consciousness brushing against the blueprint section. New options had unlocked after the valley's conquest, glowing with potential. His eyes, or rather, the magical sensors that served as his vision, fixed on one, Death Knight. The description chilled even his undead heart, elite cavalry units, forged from the souls of fallen warriors. Mounted on spectral steeds, they wield cursed blades that drain life with each strike. Cost, 500 mana cores per unit. 500 cores was a steep price, nearly a quarter of his current reserves. But the image in the blueprint showed a towering figure in black armor, its mount a creature of shadow and bone. This was no mere fodder like his skeletal warriors, this was a force that could turn the tide. Leo hesitated, his gamer's instincts warring with caution. In his past life, he'd always favored elite units in strategy games, but here, every decision carried the weight of survival. He remembered the paladin's glowing sword, the near destruction in the crypt. He couldn't afford to hold back. Purchase blueprint, he commanded silently. The system responded instantly. A surge of energy flowed from his core reserves, and knowledge flooded his mind, schematics for armor, incantations to bind souls, the rituals to summon the steeds. It was complex, requiring focused mana and a suitable sight. Leo descended the watchtower, his bones clicking softly as he moved toward the valley's center, where he had established a makeshift Necropolis core, a pulsating crystal of dark energy embedded in the earth. Around the core, his forces gathered. Skeletal warriors stood in ragged lines, their empty eye sockets fixed on him. Wraiths drifted overhead like ethereal sentinels, their whispers carrying on the wind. The bone colossus, a behemoth of assembled skeletons, loomed at the valley's mouth, its presence alone a deterrent. But Leo knew vampires would not be deterred by size alone, they would strike where he was weakest. He began the ritual for the Death Knights, channeling mana through the Necropolis core. The air grew cold, and shadows deepened as he whispered the incantations from the blueprint. One by one, spectral forms coalesced from the essence of fallen human soldiers, their souls, harvested and reshaped. Armor plates of black iron materialized, etched with runes of binding. Blades formed from condensed shadow, humming with a hunger for life. And the steeds, nightmares given form, with eyes like embers and hooves that left no trace. It took hours, draining Leo's focus and mana. Sweat would have beaded on his brow if he had skin. When it was done, 5 Death Knights stood before him, their presence radiating menace. They knelt in unison, their voices a chorus of echoes. We serve the Legion. Leo felt a flicker of pride, quickly tempered by reality. Rise. Patrol the eastern flank, that's where the terrain is most vulnerable to aerial assault. The knights mounted their steeds and rode off, silent as ghosts. Leo turned to his shade network, accessing their shared vision. Through their eyes, he saw the world in monochrome, the valley, the surrounding forests, the distant mountains where Valerius's coven was said to dwell. Nothing yet, but dusk was deepening into night. Vampires thrived in darkness. As full night fell, a chill wind swept through the valley, carrying with it the scent of decay. Leo stationed himself at the command post, a raised platform near the Necropolis core, giving him a view of the entire perimeter. His skeletal mage abilities allowed him to sense magical disturbances, and he cast a ward over the area, a net of necrotic energy that would alert him to any intrusion. The first sign came not from the wards, but from the skies. One of his shades, patrolling high above, dissolved into mist with a silent scream. Leo felt the connection sever, a sharp pain in his consciousness. He immediately focused his senses. Incoming from the northwest. Flying units, he broadcast to his forces through the system's command link. Shapes blotted out the stars, bat-like creatures with wingspans larger than a man, ridden by vampires in sleek armor. They moved with unnatural speed, diving toward the valley. Leo's wraiths rose to meet them, their forms shifting to intercept. The night erupted into chaos. Wraiths tangled with the bats, draining their life force, but the vampires dismounted mid-air, landing gracefully within the perimeter. They moved like liquid shadow, their blades flashing in the moonlight. Hold the line. Leo commanded, his voice echoing through the mental link. His skeletal warriors advanced, but the vampires were faster, stronger. They weaved through the ranks, shattering bones with precise strikes. Leo watched as one vampire, a female with pale skin and crimson eyes, tore through 3 warriors in seconds, her laughter a cruel melody in the night. He acted quickly, casting a spell he had unlocked as a skeletal mage, Bone Prison. Tendrils of calcified energy shot from the ground, ensnaring the vampire. She struggled, but it bought time. His death knights arrived, their spectral steeds galloping across the terrain. The lead knight engaged her, its cursed blade meeting her rapier in a shower of sparks. The vampire hissed, recoiling as the blade siphoned her vitality. But this was only the vanguard. More vampires descended, some on foot, others using magic to phase through the barriers. They targeted the soul traps, disabling them with bursts of dark energy. Leo's defenses were being bypassed, just as he feared. He rallied his forces, directing the bone colossus to stomp toward the largest cluster of vampires. Its massive foot came down, crushing 2, but the others scattered, too agile to be caught easily. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Leo lost count of the fallen, warriors shattered, wraiths dispersed, even one of his death knights fell when a vampire lord, likely a commander, unleashed a wave of necrotic fire. Leo himself took to the field, his skeletal form enhanced by mage spells. He hurled bolts of dark energy, but the vampires were resilient, healing from wounds almost instantly. It was a war of attrition, and he was losing. In a moment of desperation, Leo tapped into the Necropolis core, drawing on its stored essence to empower his units. A surge of energy revitalized his forces, and they pushed back, driving the vampires toward the valley's edge. The turning point came when his remaining death knights flanked the vampire commander, pinning him down. Leo seized the opportunity, casting a focused blast that tore through the vampire's chest. The commander dissolved into ash, and the remaining vampires, sensing the shift, retreated into the night as swiftly as they had come. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of dying energies and the faint moans of damaged units. Leo stood amidst the wreckage, his bones scorched and cracked. The valley was still his, but the cost was staggering. Half his skeletal warriors were destroyed, 2 wraiths lost, 1 death knight fallen, and the bone colossus bore deep gouges from vampire claws. Essence from the fallen vampires trickled into his reserves, but it was a pittance compared to what he had spent. As he began the grim task of assessing the damage, his system interface flickered. Not with the usual alerts or updates, but with a message that appeared in crimson text, unlike anything he had seen before. It hovered in his vision, stark and ominous, the Creator watches. Prepare for ascension. Leo froze, his mind reeling. The words carried a weight that went beyond the system's normal functionality. Who was the Creator? Was this related to the death god hinted at in earlier logs? A cold dread settled in his core, not fear of vampires or kings, but of something far older, something that had been pulling strings from the beginning. He stared at the message until it faded, leaving only the aftermath of battle and a new, deeper uncertainty. The aftermath of the vampire assault hung over Verdant Valley like a shroud of bone dust and spectral residue. Leo stood at the edge of the fortified ridge, his skeletal fingers tracing the cracks in his ribcage where a vampire's talon had nearly shattered him. Around him, the remnants of his Undying Legion moved with mechanical precision, skeletal warriors stacking fallen comrades for essence reclamation, wraiths drifting through the mist to patrol the perimeter, and the remaining death knights standing sentinel, their dark armor still smeared with the ichor of the night's battle. But it was the system's message that gnawed at him, a phantom itch in the hollow where his heart should have been. The Creator watches. Prepare for ascension. The blue interface hovered persistently in his vision, the words glowing with an eerie, pulsating light that seemed to seep into the very marrow of his bones. Ascension to what? Leo muttered, his voice a dry rasp that echoed in the silent valley. He had evolved from a pile of bones to a skeletal mage, gaining spellcasting abilities and a sharper intellect that mirrored his gaming prowess. Yet this message felt different, ominous, like the prelude to a boss fight he hadn't prepared for. He retreated to the command chamber he had carved into the valley's central hill, a rough-hewn space lit by floating soul lamps that cast shifting shadows on the walls. His 2 remaining death knights flanked the entrance, their empty eye sockets fixed on the darkness beyond. Leo focused on the system interface, his mental command pulling up the logs menu, a feature he had rarely used, assuming it was just for tracking essence gains and unit production. What he found chilled him more than any vampire's touch. Scrolling through the encrypted entries, he deciphered fragments of text that spoke of a fallen one, shattered divinity, and the design of reclamation. One log, dated from what the system labeled pre-awakening era, read, *, project, Undying Legion initiated by entity designation, Mortis, the Death God, following Divine Schism. Objective: forge a vessel capable of channeling divine essence for rebirth. Vessel parameters: strategic aptitude, resistance to holy energies, capacity for exponential growth. Current candidate, Leo, designation, Skeleton Prime. Status, monitoring. Asterisk. Leo's bony hands clenched into fists, the sound like twigs snapping. So I'm not just a lucky gamer who got a cheat code, he whispered, the realization settling in with a weight that made his frame shudder. I'm a lab rat in some dead god's experiment. He paced the chamber, the soul lamps flickering as his agitation stirred the ambient mana. The system had been his salvation, his tool for survival and conquest in this brutal world. But now it felt like a leash, and the creator, this Mortis, was holding the other end. He thought back to the paladin he had defeated, the holy knight's dying words, the dead gods stir in their graves. At the time, he had dismissed it as religious babble. Now, it rang with prophetic truth. As if sensing his turmoil, the system interface shimmered, and a new prompt materialized. Quest offered, reclaim the God Shard. Location, Tomb of the Fallen, Northern Wastes, distance, 200 miles. Objective, retrieve the divine fragment of Mortis to unlock Ascension Path. Rewards, unknown, system indicates, divine integration and ultimate power. Asterisk warning, the shard is guarded by ancient wards and residual divine energy. Failure may result in soul dissipation, asterisk. Leo stared at the quest, his mind racing. The promise of ultimate power was tempting, with the human kingdoms uniting against him, he needed every advantage. But the warning screamed trap. Was this the creator's way of luring him in, to make him a willing vessel? Before he could decide, a shade drifted into the chamber, its ethereal form condensing into a faint, whispering presence. Asterisk, Master, scouts report movement on the southern borders. Multiple armies converging, banners of King Alaric of Stonehold, Queen Alara of the Sun Plains, and Lord Kale of the Iron Marches. Estimated force, 10,000 combined. They march under a unified banner, the Crusade of the Living Flame. Asterisk. The news hit Leo like a physical blow. He had expected retaliation after marking himself as a threat, but this was a full-scale coalition. 10,000 soldiers, knights, archers, mages, against his depleted legion of maybe 500 undead. The math was brutal, even for a strategy genius. How long? Leo asked, his voice steady despite the dread coiling in his non-existent gut. Asterisk, 3 days, maybe 4 if they encounter resistance from minor factions. They move with purpose, Master. Their scouts have already skirmished with our patrols. Asterisk. Leo dismissed the shade, his mind whirling with calculations. He pulled up his resource screen, mana cores, 1,250. Essence reserves, moderate. Units available, 320 skeletal warriors, 15 wraiths, 4 death knights, 1 bone colossus, damaged, 20 shades, asterisk asterisk not enough. Not nearly enough to hold the valley against 10,000. He could fortify further, build more soul traps and summon additional units, but the essence cost would drain him dry, and the coalition would still overwhelm him with sheer numbers. The system quest glowed enticingly in his periphery. The God Shard, if it truly offered divine power, it might be the key to turning the tide. But the Tomb of the Fallen was 200 miles north, through treacherous wastes. Sending a force there would split his already thin resources, and if it was a trap, he'd lose critical units for nothing. He summoned his commanders, Valerius, the most experienced Death Knight, whose armor bore the scars of countless battles, and Silas, a Wraith lieutenant who had shown cunning in the vampire assault. They materialized in the chamber, their presence casting long shadows. The humans unite against us, Leo began, his tone grim. 10,000 strong, marching under a holy crusade. We have 3 days. Valerius's voice echoed from within his helmet, deep and resonant. My lord, the valley's defenses can hold against 1,000, perhaps 2. 10,000 will break us like dry twigs. We must consider retreat, fall back to the crypt, fortify the tunnels. Silas hissed, a sound like wind through dead leaves. Asterisk, retreat is death, Knight. The crypt is known to them now. They will seal us in, starve us of essence. Here, we have space to maneuver, resources to harvest. Asterisk. Leo listened, weighing their words. Valerius was right about the odds, but Silas had a point, the crypt was a death trap in a siege. His gaming instincts kicked in, In real-time strategy games, when outnumbered, you either tech up quickly or hit the enemy where they're weak. The God Shard offered a tech rush, but it was a gamble. The Coalition's weakness? Their unity was new, untested. If he could strike fast, disrupt their coordination. But to do that, he needed power beyond his current means. He opened the system interface again, navigating to the quest details. A holographic map appeared, showing the route to the Tomb of the Fallen, a jagged path through frozen wastes, dotted with markers for divine residual zones and ancient wardings. The system provided no further intel, but the logs hinted that Mortis had hidden the shard as a failsafe, a piece of his divinity waiting to be reclaimed by a worthy vessel. What if the Creator wants me to fail? Leo mused aloud, more to himself than his commanders. What if this quest is designed to weaken me, to make me vulnerable for his takeover? Valerius shifted, his armor clinking. My lord, the system has served us well. But I have felt a presence in its commands lately. A will that is not yours. In the battle with the vampires, my strike sometimes hesitated, as if guided by another hand. Leo's eye sockets flared with blue light. Why didn't you report this? I thought it was battle fatigue, the strain of new evolution. But now, with this message. Valerius trailed off, his meaning clear. Silas drifted closer. Master, the dead do not tire. But we can be bound. The vampire lord spoke of old pacts, of gods who sleep but dream of waking. Perhaps this Mortis dreams through you. The pieces clicked into place with dreadful clarity. The system wasn't just a tool, it was a conduit, and Leo was the battery being charged for someone else's revival. The ascension might be his own erasure, replaced by the consciousness of a fallen deity. Yet, the coalition marched. 3 days. He could stay, fight with what he had, and likely die a final death. Or he could gamble on the shard, risk the trap for a chance at power that could save his empire. He made his decision, not as a gamer chasing loot, but as a commander weighing survival. Valerius, prepare a detachment, 20 warriors, 5 wraiths, 2 death knights including yourself. Take the fastest route north. Your mission is to scout the Tomb of the Fallen, assess the wards, and report back. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. I need intel, not a suicide run. Valerius bowed. And if the shard is there, unguarded? Do not touch it, Leo said, his voice firm. The system wants me to reclaim it personally. That means it's keyed to my essence, or my role as a vessel. If you take it, it might trigger whatever trap Mortis set. Observe only. Silas hissed in approval. A wise caution, master. And the coalition? We prepare for battle, Leo said, turning to the valley map projected by the system. I'll use our remaining essence to summon more warriors and enhance the soul traps. We'll set ambushes in the southern passes, harass their supply lines with wraiths. Buy time for Valerius's report. If the shard is a viable option, I may go myself. If not, we make our stand here, and show these kings that the dead can still bite. As his commanders departed to execute orders, Leo stood alone in the chamber, the system interface still glowing. He accessed the logs again, searching for more clues. One entry, fragmented and corrupted, caught his eye, vessel resistance noted. Subject displays independent strategic patterns. Contingency, if vessel rejects integration, initiate protocol, Soulforge. Force assimilation via divine shard resonance. Protocol, Soulforge. The term sent a jolt through him. Was that what the quest was? A forced assimilation if he refused the ascension? He closed the interface, the blue light fading but the weight of the revelation lingering. Outside, the valley buzzed with activity. Skeletal warriors hauled stones to reinforce the walls, wraiths streaked into the sky to scout the approaching army, and the damaged bone colossus groaned as it was repaired with essence-infused bone grafts. Leo walked among them, his skeletal frame moving with a purpose that belied the uncertainty churning within. He reached the highest point of the ridge, looking south where the coalition would come. The War of Kings had been a backdrop to his rise, but now it was crashing down on him with holy fury. And behind it all, the shadow of a dead god loomed, waiting to claim what it had built. 3 days. A detachment heading north into unknown peril. A shard that might be salvation or damnation. And an army of the living, united in their desire to erase him from existence. Leo's fingers tightened around the staff he had crafted from a paladin's broken lance. He had started as a pile of bones in a mass grave, fighting goblins and spiders. Now, he faced gods and kings. The system had given him power, but it had also given him a choice: become the puppet of a fallen deity, or find a way to break the strings and rule on his own terms. As dusk fell, painting the sky in hues of blood and shadow, the system flickered one last message before going dormant: choice approaches, vessel. The Creator's patience wanes. The shard awaits. The storm gathers. Decide wisely. Leo didn't reply. He simply watched the horizon, where the first campfires of the coalition army began to spark in the distance, like stars of impending doom. The cliffhanger of his existence tightened: pursue the god shard for power, or face the coalition with the forces he had. And deep in the hollow of his skull, a plan began to form, not from the system's prompts, but from the strategic mind of a gamer who had always found a way to win, even when the odds were stacked against him. The war room of Verdant Valley's command center was a cavernous chamber carved from living rock, illuminated by the cold blue glow of mana crystals embedded in the walls. Leo stood before a spectral map projected by his system interface, his skeletal fingers tracing lines of advance and retreat. 3 days had passed since the scouts' report, 3 days of frantic preparation, and now the coalition army was a dark stain on the horizon, 10,000 strong, their banners fluttering in the morning wind. Valerius has departed, Leo murmured to himself, his voice a dry rasp that echoed in the empty chamber. He had sent the Death Knight and a detachment of 20 skeletal warriors, 5 wraiths, and 2 shades to the Tomb of the Fallen, a day's march to the north. It was a risky split of his forces, but the system's quest pulsed in his mind like a second heartbeat. Reclaimed the god shard. Reward, ultimate power, the promise was tempting, a siren's call to a strategist who had built an empire from bones and shadows. Yet, the logs he had uncovered whispered of Mortis, the fallen death god, and Leo's suspicion gnawed at him like a rat in a crypt. Was this a trap? Or a genuine path to victory? He pushed the thought aside. The immediate threat was here, now. Through the eyes of a shade hovering high above the valley, Leo watched the coalition's advance. The army was a tapestry of human might, knights in polished plate armor, archers with longbows, and infantry wielding spears and shields. At their center rode King Alaric of Stormhold, a grizzled warrior with a crown of iron, his face set in a grim mask. Beside him was the paladin Leo had faced before, Sir Gareth, now healed and burning with holy fervor. They had united 3 kingdoms against the undead scourge, and their determination was a tangible force, like heat rising from a forge. Leo's forces were arrayed in defensive positions. His necropolis, the heart of his empire, sat at the valley's rear, its spires of bone and shadow pulsing with dark energy. Around it, he had erected soul traps, ethereal snares that drained the life force of the living, and stationed 100 skeletal warriors, their empty eye sockets fixed on the approaching tide. 2 bone colossi, towering constructs of fused skeletons, stood as sentinels at the valley's mouth, their massive fists clenched. Wraiths flitted through the air like ghosts, ready to harry and disrupt. It was a formidable defense, but Leo knew numbers could overwhelm even the best-laid plans. His mind raced, calculating odds and outcomes. If I can hold them here, bleed them dry, maybe Valerius will return with the shard in time, but time was a luxury he did not have. As the sun climbed higher, the coalition halted just outside arrow range. King Alaric raised a hand, and a herald stepped forward, his voice amplified by magic. Abomination. Surrender your foul necropolis, and we shall grant you a swift death. Resist, and we will purge every trace of your kind from this land. Leo did not bother to reply. Instead, he issued a mental command through the system. The 2 bone colossi lumbered forward, their steps shaking the ground. It was a provocation, a test of the enemy's resolve. The humans responded with a volley of arrows, a black cloud that arced through the sky. Most bounced harmlessly off the colossi's bony hides, but a few found gaps, chipping away at their structure. Leo felt a pang of loss, each chip was essence wasted, mana spent. But he had expected this. As the arrows fell, his wraiths swooped down, their incorporeal forms passing through the front lines of infantry. Soldiers screamed as cold hands gripped their souls, sapping their strength. Chaos rippled through the ranks. Hold the line. Sir Gareth bellowed, his sword blazing with divine light. He charged forward, leading a contingent of knights against the colossi. Leo watched, his mind a cold engine of strategy. He directed his skeletal warriors to flank the knights, emerging from hidden trenches dug overnight. The clash was brutal and cacophonous, steel meeting bone, holy fire against necrotic energy. Leo's warriors fought with silent efficiency, but the knights were skilled and determined. For every skeleton shattered, a knight fell, his essence flowing back to Leo through the system. Manacores +5, the interface chimed in his mind. He used them immediately, summoning more warriors to replace the fallen. The battle raged for hours, the valley floor becoming a charnel house of broken bodies and scattered bones. Leo's defenses held, but at a cost. One of the bone colossi collapsed under a concentrated assault of ballista fire, its massive form crumbling into a heap of debris. Leo felt the loss like a physical blow. It had taken weeks to build that colossus, and now it was gone. His necropolis took damage too, as mages in the coalition ranks launched fireballs and lightning bolts at its spires. Cracks appeared in the bone structure, and the blue glow flickered ominously. Necropolis integrity, 65%, the system reported. Leo gritted his teeth. If it fell, his empire would crumble. Meanwhile, far to the north, Valerius and his detachment reached the tomb of the fallen. It was a desolate place, a jagged maw of black stone set into a mountainside, shrouded in perpetual mist. Valerius, a death knight clad in dark armor adorned with skull motifs, dismounted from his spectral steed. His voice was a hollow echo. Scout the perimeter. Leave no corner unchecked. The shades drifted ahead, their ethereal forms slipping through cracks in the stone, while the skeletal warriors formed a defensive circle. The wraiths hovered above, scanning for threats. The tomb's interior was a labyrinth of corridors lined with ancient carvings depicting scenes of death and decay, Mortis in his prime, commanding legions of undead, before his fall. Valerius moved cautiously, his sword drawn. The air was thick with stale magic, a scent of dust and forgotten power. After an hour of exploration, they found the central chamber. It was vast, with a high ceiling lost in shadow. In the center, on a pedestal of black obsidian, rested the god shard. It was a crystal the size of a human skull, pulsing with a sickly green light that cast long, dancing shadows. The light seemed to breathe, in and out, like a sleeping heart. Valerius approached, his armor clinking softly. "This is it," he whispered to his warriors. "The system's objective." He reached out a gauntlet hand, but hesitated. Leo's final command echoed in his mind, "Be wary." This may be a trap, Valerius was loyal to his core, a creation of Leo's will, but he felt a strange pull from the shard, a whisper that tugged at his undead essence. He shook it off. "Secure the area. I will retrieve it." As he stepped closer, the green light intensified. The carvings on the walls seemed to writhe, as if coming to life. A low hum filled the chamber, growing louder until it was a deafening roar. Valerius gripped the shard, and the world exploded in light. Images flooded his mind, Mortis, not as a fallen god, but as a towering entity of shadow and bone, his laughter echoing across eons. The system interface in Valerius's perception glitched, static fuzzing across his vision. Then, a voice spoke, not through sound, but directly into his consciousness. It was ancient, cold, and dripping with malice. At last, the voice of Mortis hissed. "A vessel draws near. But you are not the one I seek. Where is the master? Where is Leo?" Valerius tried to pull away, but his hand was fused to the crystal. The green light seeped into his armor, crawling up his arm. He felt his control slipping, his loyalty to Leo fraying at the edges. "I serve the Lich King," he forced out, his voice strained. "A king of bones," Mortis laughed, the sound like grinding stones. "A puppet on my strings. This system was my design, a net to catch a worthy host. Leo has proven resourceful, strong enough to wield my power, yet naive enough to follow my quest. Bring him to me, Death Knight. Offer his body, and I shall grant you immortality beyond your wildest dreams. Refuse, and I will unmake you, scattering your essence to the void." Back in Verdant Valley, Leo was unaware of the confrontation in the tomb. The battle had reached a fever pitch. King Alaric had committed his reserves, 1,000 fresh soldiers pouring into the fray. Leo's forces were being pushed back, step by bloody step. His necropolis integrity dropped to 40%, and he lost another colossi, its destruction sending a shockwave through the valley. Leo himself took to the field, his skeletal mage form weaving spells of darkness and decay. He blasted a group of knights with a necrotic bolt, their armor rusting away to dust in seconds. But for every spell he cast, his mana reserves dwindled. "Manacores, 120/500, the system warned. He was running out of fuel. Through the chaos, he caught a glimpse of Sir Gareth, cutting a path toward him. The paladin's eyes burned with hatred. "Your end is here, monster," he shouted, his holy sword cleaving through skeletons like wheat. Leo retreated, buying time. He activated a soul trap, ensnaring a dozen soldiers and draining their essence. Mana cores plus 30. It was a drop in the ocean. He needed a miracle, or the god shard. His mind flickered to Valerius. "What's taking so long?" He tried to reach out through the system's communication link, but static greeted him, as if something was jamming the signal. A cold dread settled in his ribcage. The trap is sprung. In the tomb, Valerius wrestled with Mortis's influence. The death god's voice was a constant pressure, promising power, whispering lies. "Leo is weak. He hesitates. He fears me. But you could be my general, ruling over this world in my name. All you need do is bring him here." Valerius's loyalty was a core part of his being, forged by Leo's will. With a monumental effort, he wrenched his hand free from the shard, stumbling back. The green light receded, but the voice remained. "Fool! You cannot resist forever. The shard calls to him. He will come, and when he does, I will have my vessel." Valerius turned to his warriors. "We must return. The master is in danger, and this thing is a threat greater than the humans." He grabbed the god shard, wrapping it in a cloth to mute its glow. It hummed against his side, a persistent reminder of the bargain offered. As they fled the tomb, the carvings on the walls seemed to watch them go, their stone eyes gleaming with malevolent light. In Verdant Valley, Leo made a desperate gamble. He ordered a full retreat to the Necropolis, sacrificing his remaining forward units to buy time. The coalition cheered, thinking victory was at hand. But as they advanced, Leo triggered his last trap, a network of buried soul forges, overloaded with mana. The ground erupted in geysers of spectral energy, consuming hundreds of soldiers in a wave of necrotic fire. The explosion rocked the valley, and the coalition's advance stalled, their ranks thrown into disarray. Leo staggered into the necropolis, his form cracked and smoking. The battle was not over, but he had bought a reprieve, a few hours, perhaps. As he slumped against a bone pillar, the system pinged. A message from Valerius, fragmented and weak, *shard acquired. Mortis speaks. He offers power for your body. Returning with haste, *. Leo's hollow eyes stared into the darkness. The cliffhanger hung in the air, thick with tension. Mortis's offer echoed in his mind, ultimate power, at the cost of his very self. The god shard was coming, and with it, a choice that would define not just this battle, but his entire existence. Outside, the coalition regrouped, their cries of vengeance mingling with the moaning wind. The war for the world was reaching its climax, and Leo stood at the precipice, his empire trembling on the edge of ruin. The god shard pulsed in Leo's skeletal hand, a malevolent heartbeat that resonated through the very marrow of his bones. Valerius stood before him in the command chamber of the damaged necropolis, his deathly armor still smeared with the dust of the tomb of the fallen. Outside, the sounds of battle echoed, the clash of steel against bone, the screams of dying men, and the earth-shaking steps of his remaining bone colossus holding the line against the human coalition. "My lord," Valerius rasped, his voice a hollow echo. "Mortis offers power beyond imagination. But his words, they taste of chains." Leo stared at the shard. It was a jagged piece of obsidian veined with crimson light, warm to the touch despite his lack of flesh. In his mind's eye, the system interface flickered, displaying new text in blood-red glyphs, "God shard acquired. Integration available. Accept ascension. Y/N." For a moment, Leo hesitated. The temptation was overwhelming. He could feel the power radiating from the shard, an ocean of potential that promised to sweep away the 10,000 humans battering his defenses. With it, he could become invincible, a true god of death rather than just a clever skeleton with a cheat menu. His strategic mind raced through the possibilities: instant victory, no more losses, the war of kings ended in a single stroke. But then he remembered the system's oddities. The way it had always nudged him toward aggression. The hidden logs Valerius had uncovered in the tomb, speaking of a vessel protocol. The quest to reclaim the shard that had appeared just when he was most desperate. It wasn't a gift. It was a trap. "Mortis," Leo whispered, his voice a dry rattle. "Show yourself." The shard flared. A figure materialized in the chamber, a spectral form of shifting shadows and pale light, crowned with antlers of bone. Mortis, the fallen death god. His presence sucked the warmth from the air, frosting the stone walls. Leo, the god's voice boomed, not through ears but directly into his consciousness. You have done well. My system guided you from worthless bones to the threshold of divinity. Now, complete the journey. Accept my essence. Together, we will rule this realm and beyond. Leo felt the pull. The shard wanted to merge with him, to sink into his core and rewrite what he was. He saw flashes of what Mortis offered, armies of billions, worlds crumbling before his will, eternity as a sovereign of death. It was everything his gamer's heart had ever dreamed of when he topped leaderboards in strategy sims. But it wasn't his dream. Not like this. You designed the system, Leo said, his grip tightening on the shard. Not as a tool for me. As a cage. You needed a host strong enough to contain you after your fall, didn't you? Someone who could build an empire, gather power, and then hand it all over when the time was right. Mortis's form wavered. A symbiosis. I offered you power when you were nothing. Now, return the favor. Do not be a fool, mortal. The humans will destroy you without my help. Outside, a thunderous crash shook the necropolis. Dust rained from the ceiling. The system flashed a warning, Necropolis integrity, 23%. Eastern wall breached. Coalition forces penetrating inner defenses. Valerius stepped forward, his hand on his sword. My lord, we must decide. The battle turns against us. Leo looked at his Death Knight. Valerius had been one of his first major creations, a loyal commander who had never questioned an order. But in his eyes, or the glowing embers that served as eyes, Leo saw something unexpected, trust. Not in Mortis's offer, but in him. You resisted his corruption in the tomb, Leo said. I serve the Legion, Valerius replied simply. Not a dead god. That decided it. Leo wasn't just a vessel. He was a commander. A strategist. He had built this empire from nothing, outmaneuvered kings, and survived against all odds. He wouldn't surrender it to a parasitic deity, no matter how shiny the prize. No, Leo said, his voice firm. I'll take my chances with the humans. Mortis's form darkened. Then you will die, and I will find another. But first, I will reclaim what is mine. The god lunged, a tide of shadow rushing toward Leo. But Leo was ready. He had been planning for betrayal since the moment Valerius returned. With a mental command, he activated every soul trap in the chamber, devices designed to capture essence, now repurposed as a containment field. Blue energy crackled, forming a cage around Mortis's spectral form. Foolish mortal. These toys cannot hold a god. Mortis roared, straining against the barriers. They don't have to, Leo said. Just long enough. He raised the god shard high. Instead of accepting the integration, he poured his own mana into it, not to merge, but to overload. The system screamed warnings, critical energy buildup detected. God shard integrity failing. Recommend immediate cessation. What are you doing? Mortis shrieked, his form flickering as the shard began to crack. Breaking the trap, Leo growled. With all his will, he focused on one command, destroy. The shard exploded. A wave of pure death energy erupted, shattering the soul traps and hurling Valerius against the wall. Leo was at the epicenter. The power didn't merge with him, it tried to consume him, to tear apart his very being. He felt his bones cracking, his consciousness fraying at the edges. Mortis's laughter echoed in his mind. You have only hastened your end. But Leo held on. He remembered his first moments in this world, a pile of bones in a mass grave, a goblin's club descending. He remembered building his first skeletal warrior, scouting with his first shade, outsmarting the paladin. This was his empire. His strategy. His second chance. No, he whispered through the pain. I'm taking it all. He didn't try to control the energy. He absorbed it. Not as a vessel, but as a conqueror. The system interface glitched, then reformed in a blaze of golden light. New text scrolled before his eyes, Godshard destroyed. Mortis's consciousness dispersed. Essence integration commencing. Congratulations. Evolution achieved, Lich King. Power flooded him. Not the borrowed, treacherous power Mortis had offered, but something pure, his own, amplified 1,000-fold. His bones reforged themselves, gleaming with dark metal and etched with runes of command. A crown of spectral energy formed above his skull. He could feel every unit in his legion, every building in his empire, as extensions of his will. New abilities unlocked: Soul Storm, Necrotic Dominion, Eternal Command. The chamber fell silent. Mortis was gone, his presence scattered into nothingness. Valerius pushed himself up, kneeling. My king. Leo flexed his new hand, watching arcs of violet energy dance between his fingers. The system was still there, but it felt different, no longer a separate entity, but a part of him. The hidden protocols were gone. This was his tool now, truly. Status report, Leo commanded, his voice now carrying an echo of power. Legion status, 42% operational. Coalition forces, 78% strength. Necropolis integrity, 19%. Estimated time to collapse, 27 minutes. He didn't have much time. But he didn't need it. With a thought, he was at the front lines. The battlefield was chaos. His remaining forces, a ragged mix of skeletal warriors, wraiths, and a single battered bone colossus, were being pushed back toward the necropolis. The human coalition, 10,000 strong, advanced under a forest of banners. At their head rode King Alaric of Stormhold, the coalition leader, his armor shining in the midday sun as he directed the assault. Press on. Alaric bellowed. The abomination's fortress crumbles. For the living. The humans cheered, their morale high. They had broken the eastern wall, and streams of soldiers poured into the breaches, cutting down Leo's defenders. Leo appeared atop the necropolis's central spire, his new form casting a long shadow. He didn't shout. He simply raised a hand. Soul Storm, activated. The sky darkened. Whirlwinds of spectral energy descended upon the coalition's ranks, tearing through armor and flesh. Soldiers screamed as their souls were ripped from their bodies, adding to Leo's power. The tide of battle shifted instantly. His forces, sensing his presence, rallied with renewed ferocity. What sorcery is this? Alaric roared, cutting down a wraith that lunged at him. Leo descended, floating down to the battlefield. The fighting around him stilled as both sides stared. He landed before the breached wall, his Lich King form radiating authority. King Alaric, Leo said, his voice carrying across the field. Your war ends here. Alaric spurred his horse forward, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. You are the bone horror that has plagued our lands. I expected a monster, not a talking skeleton with delusions of grandeur. I am Leo, he replied. And this is my empire. You have two choices, surrender, or be destroyed. The human king laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You may have new tricks, creature, but you are still outnumbered. My armies have shattered your defenses. Look around you, your stronghold falls. Leo did look. The necropolis was indeed damaged, his forces depleted. But he felt no fear. Only calculation. With his new powers, the numbers didn't matter. He could wipe out the coalition in minutes if he wished. But that wasn't his style. He was a strategist, not a butcher. And something in Alaric's defiance reminded him of himself, a leader fighting for what he believed in. You fight bravely, Leo said. But you fight for kings who squabble over borders while their people starve. I offer something else, order. Unity. Under my rule, the wars end. The realms unite. Under the heel of the dead. Alaric spat. Never. We are the living. We will not bow to corpses. He dismounted, drawing his greatsword. The blade glowed with enchanted light, a relic meant to slay undead. Around them, the battle had paused, soldiers on both sides watching. Then let us settle this, Leo said. A duel. You and me. If you win, my legion disbands. If I win, your coalition surrenders, and you swear allegiance to my empire. Alaric's eyes narrowed. You would gamble your entire empire on a single fight? I would, Leo said. Because I know I will win. The human king studied him. He saw the confidence in Leo's posture, the new power thrumming in the air. But he was a warrior, proud and unyielding. To refuse would be cowardice in front of his men. Very well, Alaric said, hefting his sword. Let the gods witness this. For the fate of the realms. He charged, his blade sweeping down in an arc of holy light. Leo didn't move. At the last second, he raised a hand, and a shield of dark energy deflected the blow. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground. Is that all? Leo asked. Alaric attacked again, faster this time, a flurry of strikes that would have cut down any mortal foe. But Leo was no longer mortal. He flowed around the attacks, his movements precise and economical. He wasn't just fighting, he was analyzing. Alaric was strong, skilled, but predictable. He fought with honor and rigid technique, weaknesses Leo could exploit. After a minute, Leo decided to end it. He didn't want to kill Alaric. The king was a valuable piece on the board. As Alaric lunged, Leo sidestepped and tapped his finger against the king's breastplate. Necrotic Dominion, activated. Alaric froze. The enchantments on his armor flickered and died. He tried to move, but his limbs locked in place. Not from paralysis, but from Leo's will pressing down on him. You see? Leo said softly. I could have killed you at any moment. But I don't want you dead. I want you to serve. To help me build something that lasts. Alaric strained, sweat beading on his forehead. I will never serve you. You will, Leo said. Because the alternative is watching your people die for nothing. Look at your men. He gestured. The soul storm had faded, but Leo's forces now surrounded the coalition, their weapons ready. The humans were outmaneuvered, outmatched. Without Alaric's leadership, they would break. I offer peace, Leo said. Under my rule, no more war of kings. No more pointless battles. Unity. Prosperity. Or you can die here, and I will conquer anyway. The choice is yours. Alaric's sword clattered to the ground. He sank to his knees, not in submission, but in despair. He had fought his whole life for his kingdom, only to face an enemy he couldn't defeat. Swear it, Alaric whispered. Swear you will not slaughter my people. I swear, Leo said. Join me, and they will be protected. As citizens of the new empire. The human king bowed his head. Then I yield. The coalition surrenders. A murmur ran through the human ranks, then a slow lowering of weapons. Leo's forces stood down. The battle was over. But as Leo turned to address the gathered armies, a new alert flashed in his vision. Not from the system, but from a shade on the distant border. Image, unknown fleet approaching from the eastern sea. Vessels of non-native design. Energy signatures, extreme. He paused. The War of Kings was won. But something else was coming. And on the horizon, the coalition leader rose, his eyes meeting Leo's with a challenge not yet extinguished. You have won this day, Lich King. But a true ruler is tested not in victory, but in what follows. I will watch. And if you break your oath. He left the threat hanging, the promise of future conflict still alive in his gaze. The morning mist clung to Verdant Valley like a shroud, but Leo felt no chill. His skeletal form, now wreathed in the dark energy of a Lich King, stood upon a raised platform of packed earth and stone, a makeshift arena constructed overnight at the center of the battlefield. Around him, the remnants of his Undying Legion stood in silent ranks, skeletal warriors with notched blades, wraiths drifting like smoke, and the hulking form of a bone colossus looming at the valley's edge. Across from him, King Alaric of Stormhold adjusted his grip on his greatsword, the morning light glinting off polished steel plate. You accept my terms, then? Leo's voice echoed with a hollow resonance, amplified by necromantic energy. A duel to decide this war. Your surrender, or mine. Alaric, a bear of a man with a graying beard and eyes that had seen too many battles, spat on the ground. I accept, monster. But know this, even if you defeat me, my people will never bow to the dead. We shall see, Leo replied, his mind already analyzing the terrain. The system interface, now a seamless part of his consciousness, displayed tactical data, Alaric's combat style, aggressive, reliant on brute strength, environmental factors, soft ground near the stream, rocky outcroppings to the west, and morale levels, coalition forces at 42%, his own legion at 89%. He dismissed the display with a thought. This wasn't about numbers anymore, it was about theater. A herald from the coalition, a young knight with a trembling voice, stepped forward. By the ancient rites of single combat, let this duel decide the fate of the War of Kings. No interference, no retreat. To the death. The last words hung in the air, and Leo almost smiled. Death had become his domain. Alaric charged first, his greatsword sweeping in a wide arc meant to cleave Leo in two. But Leo didn't move. Instead, he raised a hand, and the ground beneath Alaric's feet erupted in spectral chains, shadow bind, a spell unlocked with his Lich King evolution. The chains wrapped around the king's legs, slowing his charge to a stumble. Alaric roared, hacking at the ethereal bonds with his sword, but they reformed instantly. Cheap tricks. Alaric snarled, his face flushed with effort. Strategy, Leo corrected calmly. He gestured, and 5 skeletal warriors emerged from the mist behind Alaric. Not to attack, they formed a loose circle, blocking any retreat. You see, Your Majesty, this isn't just about strength. It's about control. Alaric broke free with a burst of divine energy, a last gift from the paladins, no doubt, and lunged again. This time, Leo met him head-on. His bone staff, now crackling with violet energy, parried the great sword with a shower of sparks. The impact sent vibrations through Leo's frame, but he held firm. He'd calculated this. Alaric's strength was immense, but his stamina was waning after weeks of campaigning. Leo, sustained by necromancy, felt no fatigue. They traded blows, steel ringing against enchanted bone. Alaric fought with the desperation of a man who knew his kingdom depended on this moment. His swings were powerful, each one capable of shattering stone, but Leo danced around them, using his smaller size and preternatural speed to his advantage. He wasn't just fighting, he was demonstrating. Every dodge, every parry, was a lesson to the watching armies. You fight well for a bag of bones. Alaric grunted, breathing heavily. And you for a mortal, Leo replied. He saw an opening. Alaric overextended on a downward chop. Instead of striking, Leo cast Soul Drain. A tendril of dark energy shot from his hand, not at Alaric, but at the ground where the king's shadow fell. The shadow writhed, and Alaric cried out as a wave of weakness washed over him. His sword dipped, just for a second. That was all Leo needed. He slammed his staff into Alaric's chestplate, not with physical force, but with a pulse of necrotic energy. The metal blackened and cracked. Alaric staggered back, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Leo advanced, his empty eye sockets glowing with cold light. Yield, Leo said, his voice soft but carrying across the silent valley. Never, Alaric wheezed, raising his sword again. But his arms trembled. Leo sighed inwardly. He'd hoped to avoid this, but the king's pride left no choice. He activated Lich King's aura, a new ability that radiated pure dread. The temperature dropped. Coalition soldiers at the edges of the arena fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Alaric froze, his eyes wide with terror. In that moment of paralysis, Leo struck. He didn't use his staff. Instead, he reached out with a skeletal hand and touched Alaric's forehead. Absorb, he commanded the system. The process was swift and silent. Alaric's essence, his life force, his memories, his very soul, flowed into Leo. The king's body crumpled, empty, as Leo felt a surge of power. Mana cores flooded his reserves, but more than that, he gained flashes of Alaric's life, a childhood in Stormhold's castles, the weight of a crown, the love for a daughter who died in the war. Leo pushed the emotions aside. They were data now, to be analyzed later. He turned to the coalition armies, Alaric's corpse at his feet. Your king is gone, he announced, his voice booming with amplified magic. But his sacrifice need not be in vain. Lay down your arms, swear allegiance to my empire, and you will live. Fight, and you will join my legion, one way or another. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind. Then a knight, Alaric's second-in-command, dropped his sword. It clattered on the stones, a signal that spread like wildfire. Weapons fell, banners dipped. The coalition's morale, already fragile, shattered completely. Leo nodded to his commanders, a death knight he'd named Kale, and a wraith lieutenant called Whisper. Secure the surrender. Disarm them, but do no harm unless provoked. As his forces moved in, he felt a strange emptiness. Victory, but at what cost? He pushed the thought away. Sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford. Over the next week, Leo consolidated his rule. The system helped, providing interfaces for governance, resource management, loyalty metrics, construction queues. He established his capital in Verdant Valley, renaming it Necropolis Prime. The human survivors were integrated under strict but fair laws, work for the empire, receive protection and food. Those who resisted were given a choice, exile or service in the legion. Most chose service, and Leo found that willing converts made stronger skeletons. On the 7th day, he stood before the assembled masses, undead and living alike, in the great plaza of Necropolis Prime. A throne of fused bone and dark crystal had been erected, carved with runes of power. The system prompted him, coronation available. Claim title, Lich Emperor. Unlocks final tier of abilities. Proceed. Y/N. He chose Y. As he sat upon the throne, a crown materialized above his skull, not of metal, but of swirling shadows and faint starlight. It settled, and he felt a final transformation. His bones strengthened, his magic deepened. The system interface, once a blue screen, now became a part of his vision, seamless and intuitive. He was no longer just a user, he was the core of the system itself. I am Leo, he declared, his voice echoing across the realm. Once a man, now your emperor. The War of Kings is over. From this day forth, we are one empire, the Eternal Legion. Let there be peace, secured by strength. A cheer rose, hesitant at first, then growing. Even the skeletons rattled their bones in approval. For a moment, Leo allowed himself to feel satisfaction. He'd done it. From a pile of bones in a mass grave to ruler of a continent. The death god's trap had been sprung and broken, and he stood free. Then, as the celebrations began, a sharp ping echoed in his mind. The system, now his own, flashed a red alert he'd never seen before. Priority, threat detected. Scanning, a map of the continent appeared in his vision, and beyond its eastern shores, a fleet of strange vessels blinked into existence, ships of unknown design, moving with impossible speed. Analysis, interdimensional signatures. Hostile intent confirmed. ETA, 30 days. Leo's satisfaction evaporated. He rose from his throne, the crown of shadows pulsing. Kale, he called, and the death night approached. Double the patrols on the eastern coast. And bring me every scout report from the last month. It seems our work is not yet done. As he looked out over his hard-won empire, Leo felt the old familiar thrill, the challenge of a new game, with higher stakes than ever before. The system had been his tool for conquest. Now, it would be his shield against whatever came from beyond the stars.